Hey everyone, Trav here, just to remind you that every new active subscriber directly contributes to how quickly we can produce these kinds of conversations for you. So please take a second to subscribe, smash that like button on the video, and make sure you leave us a comment in the comment section. Now please enjoy Konstantin Kisin versus Destiny.
Are you the same as you were 10 or 15 years ago? What do you mean by that? The same. You're not unchanged, right?
Are you pretending to be a moron, or are you actually being one?
Your guys' definitions for everything change at all points in time. That's always the issue. That's always the frustrating thing when it comes to fighting.
Who's us guys?
Conservatives.
I'm not a conservative.
I know you say you're not, but are you sure you're not running for a political party right now? Because that was the most politician answer I've ever heard in my life, of a conservative view on foreign policy. Over the past 5 years, so you do this thing where you're like, well, I have to choose between two things.
I'm not going to talk if you keep interrupting me. I'm not interested in
I'm
this.
not interrupting
whatever
you.
This is. You are.
I'm literally not. I'm asking you a question. You just refuse to answer. This is the game. How did I do it again? I'm asking you a clear question. You can't give me an answer.
I'm not going to talk to you unless you listen to what I'm saying as well as me listening to what you're saying.
I am listening.
Okay, good.
Welcome to Pangburn. Are we ready to go? What I hope to see on the Pangburn stage here tonight is what I always want to see, and that's good faith, helpful discourse. The Pangburn maxim, the communication maxim, is that good faith and helpfulness are the minimum requirements for a fruitful dialectic. That's what we want to see. And ultimately, I hope this conversation tonight, when it's shared with the world, will maximize well-being for humanity in one way or another. So, in saying that, please welcome to the stage Konstantin Kisin and Destiny! Can national identity survive open immigration?
I guess I'll kind of take the reins on this. I feel like when I hear people talk about things related to open borders, mass migration, or national identity, there's kind of two questions that always pop up in my mind, and I never hear people actually kind of tack down what they mean when they say these things. So the first thing is, for national identity, I don't know as much about the various identities that exist in the UK, but I know for the United States, to try to find an overlap between identity from a gay guy in San Francisco versus like a farmer in Iowa or something, there's not many commonalities there to speak of when you talk about national identity, especially when I'm thinking of it in the context of what type of immigrant would threaten that whatever unified identity, whatever those two things are. So I'm kind of curious, I guess, when I think about national identity, when I think about it being threatened by people, my first question is, what is the national identity that we're trying to protect for the United States or for the United Kingdom? And then when we talk about like migration or mass migration, what do we mean exactly when we say that?
Well, okay. So there's two questions there. What is national identity and what is immigration? Why don't we start in reverse and talk about immigration? Take Britain as an example, right? So I've lived in this country. I came to Britain it was just about Russia. Prior to that, it was the Soviet Union in 1996. So let's go back to 1991, because that's the data when we have the census. 1991. What has happened in the last 35 years? So in the last 35 years ago, this country had a population of 58 million people. Today, the population is 70 million. Almost all of that is due to mass immigration. So the population of Britain, the immigrant population of Britain, that's first generation, people who've arrived, went from 4 million to 12 million in the space of 35 years, right? It trebled in 35 years. Now, you might say, well, you know, is that a lot? Is that a little? Who knows? That is more people, in the last 35 years, more people came to Britain than came to Britain in the previous 2 millennia. So more people in 35 years than had come in 2,000 years. Now, that seems like quite a lot, right? Now, we'll talk about some more facts about this, and then we can talk about national identity. I'm going to take a little time, if you don't mind, just to lay this out.
Yeah, I guess just to kind of poke around as you answer.
Yeah, but hold on. Let me just let's talk about what we mean by immigration, right?
Okay. Well, then also the mass, because I hear a lot of these words will be like, it was a lot of people
Well, hold
I
on.
was like, what does that mean? Yeah.
I'm explaining it. So
Okay.
more people in 35 years than 2,000 years, that sounds like quite a lot of people. Is
Not
that fair?
necessarily, no.
Is that fair?
No, not really, right? In the
Not
context, like
really.
if I were to ask for like the total growth of wealth compared to like the last like 50 years might also dwarf the last 2,000 years, or the total amount of carbon pollution, or the total amount of TV episodes or plays written or songs written. Like I don't know if I would just arbitrarily say, I'm going to look at immigration and I'm going to measure it past some 1,000-year thing or whatever.
You don't think that more people coming into a country in 35 years than had come in the previous 2,000 years is quite a lot?
I just think that that statement is like vacuous and meaningless. When we say quite a lot, what, like, should it have been less? Like, what kind of immigrants shouldn't have come? No. What does that mean?
You're making it into a moral conversation. I'm talking about purely numbers. You might think it's a great thing, right? Like,
well, to be clear, I'm not talking. Just to be clear, I'm not talking moral.
You keep interrupting.
You said a lot, yeah.
You keep interrupting. So,
okay.
If we're talking about quite a lot, you keep trying to make it a moral thing.
I'm not making it a moral thing.
If we're going to have a conversation, you're going to have to let me finish a sentence at least.
Well, just don't misquote my position.
Okay, so just calm down for a bit.
I'm super calm.
I know you've got your Red Bull. Just have some
my
water,
Red Bull.
chill
I'm
out.
still super calm.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a very simple question. Yeah.
If more people, if you're making a moral issue, it becomes very clouded and complicated. Let's just talk about what we're talking about in terms of pure numbers, right? If more people have come into a country in 35 years than have come in 2,000 years, that is objectively a lot. Now, you might think it's a good thing. Like, I like ice cream, and if I eat a tub of ice cream, I'm not going to say that's not a lot of ice cream. I still like it, but it's a lot of ice cream, right? We'd accept that. It's more, a scoop is not a lot of ice cream, a tub is a lot of ice cream. So more people coming into a country in 35 years than had come in 2,000 years is objectively a lot of people, okay?
Just to be clear, when you say a lot, that's a normative value that's with respect to some kind of norm or mean. When you say a lot...
Oh, yeah, compared to before.
Yeah,
compared
that's objectively, that is
objectively
objectively true. It's just kind of a meaningless statement. Like,
so
everything is a lot more than the past
what I'm saying is objectively true. I'm grateful.
Correct, yes. That's a meaningless statement, but yes.
Now that we've got there, what does it mean? Well, first of all, think about it like this. And again, it's not about whether you like it or not, whether you think it's a good thing or not, or a bad thing. The three biggest cities in this country, in the last 30 years, have ceased to be majority inhabited by the people who are native to this land. That's just a fact. And I am one of the people who's come here in that time. So I'm not saying it's only a terrible thing, but it's an objective fact. The three biggest cities in the country are now majority minority. London, and this has happened very quickly. London was 80% white British in 1991. It is probably around 30% white British today. So if you have seen that level of change in the city in which you live, think about this as well. 3/4 of the people who live in this country today are over the age of 35. So all of this has happened within the lifetime of one generation, effectively. That is a level of change that is A, completely unprecedented, B, extremely transformative, whether you like it or not, good or bad, whatever you may think. You might think, oh, you know, the amount of different kinds of food has got better. It's true, objectively. But it's also true, objectively, that entire swathes of this city are no longer inhabited by the people who used to live here. Again, this is an objective fact. You can like it, you can dislike it, but that is something that has happened. This is true of London, it's true of Manchester, it's true of Birmingham, and it's true of several other smaller cities in this country. By 2060, according to current projections, white British people will become a minority in this country. 2060 is the next 35 years, right? And that's the entire kind of demographic transformation. These are facts. Forget about people's opinions, my opinion, your opinion. In terms of illegal immigration, there are now almost 1 million, we don't know exactly because it's hard to measure, but we have almost 1 million illegal immigrants in Britain today, which for a population of 70 million is quite a lot. We currently spend £14 million a day I'm not talking about the cost to the taxpayer of having 1 million illegal immigrants here. I'm talking about how much we spend to accommodate them and all other things. Now, 14 million, is that a lot per day? It's quite a lot. But also this is happening at an unprecedented rate. More people come to Britain illegally today than came legally when I came here in 1996. I'll say that again. More people come here illegally every year than came here in 1996 when I came here. That's the level of change when it comes to illegal immigration, and the cost of it, £14 million a day, is increased by a factor of 10 in the last 10 years alone. So it's 1,000% more than what it was. Those are the facts about immigration. So when we talk about immigration and whether it's compatible with national identity, it depends what we mean. If we're talking about 20, 30, 40,000 people a year, highly selective from compatible cultures as it used to be, perfectly compatible, and in fact, I think probably quite desirable. If we're talking about what we've seen over the last 30 years, I don't think it's compatible with any sort of national identity at all. Now, I've been talking for a long time, so we can get to national identity after you've addressed that.
Sure. So I guess the thing that is a little bit strange to me about the immigration question is that sometimes I'll hear a bunch of descriptions laid out, and I don't know exactly what I'm supposed to do with them. There's oftentimes a lack of a prescriptive statement. It seems like there's a little bit of fear of committing to any particular idea about what an ideal immigrant would look like. And then it feels like we're sometimes also lumping a ton of immigrants together. So for instance, when we say there have been so many more immigrants that have come here in the past 30, 35 years, but then we also mention like illegal immigrants or asylum seekers, these are all different groups of people. So I don't know why. I
separated them out. I talked about legal immigration and illegal immigration, right?
I understand, but so the prompt has to do with basically can a country's culture, whatever, survive mass migration? Illegal immigrants are not mass migrating here. The mass migration...
They are. So I just told you more illegal immigrants come here every year now than legal immigrants came here 30 years ago.
I understand that, but if you look at
they are mass migrating.
So then are the legal ones mass migrating, or what? Is it just...
The legal immigrants are also mass migrating. It's possible for them both to be mass migrating.
But it's like 10 to 1, right? So
yes.
So comparing the two, it seems like we're talking about different kinds of... We're probably talking about different kinds of immigrants. We talk about legal versus illegal.
We're talking about both, yeah.
Well, no.
I'm talking about both.
You don't see any difference between a legal immigrant versus an illegal immigrant?
Well, of course I do.
Okay.
But they are both mass migrating here. They're both coming here in unprecedented numbers.
Everything definitionally is unprecedented as you move forward in years. We have an unprecedented amount of technology, an unprecedented amount of energy generation, an unprecedented amount of...
I think you might be confused about the meaning of the word unprecedented.
Unprecedented as in it hasn't happened at that level before. Yeah.
Right. So if we have immigration of 20,000 people a year, that wouldn't be unprecedented because we had that before.
Yeah, but the population is growing of the country, the population of the rest of the planet is growing, the economy is growing, there's a whole bunch of other factors at play. It's not like all else equal, there's just 10 million people that have shown up. Like there's other factors at play at all points in time as well. So yes, it's a bit reductive to say like, well, we have an unprecedented wave of whatever. There's unprecedented things happening definitionally every year forward into the future we go.
No, that's not true.
What's the thing that's been frozen in time?
I just explained it to you.
Yes, you laid out a bunch of numbers, and I just explained why they're contextless and meaningless. But now I'm asking, what is the thing that's unprecedented?
Look,
or I'm sorry, what would be a thing that is not changing in the past 30 years? Like if you had to look at something...
One of the most amazing things of arguing with anybody from your position is the extent to which they refuse to understand what words mean. I just explained to you repeatedly what unprecedented means. It means that it hasn't happened before. There have been times in the history of this country when its immigration was in the tens of thousands, and for us to go back to that would not be going forward to something unprecedented. It would be returning to something that we used to do.
Sure.
Right?
And my question
is... So what has happened in the last 30 years... I
understand what's happened. You've explained it several
unprecedented.
Times. Is there anything in U.S. culture, in British culture, that has remained the same for the past 30, 40, 50, 60 years, for the past 100 years, that doesn't have an unprecedented thing happening constantly?
Absolutely. I mean, that is what a culture is. It is what is preserved over time.
How?
A culture is what people do without having been told to do so by a law.
But what is an example of a culture that is unchanging?
How much have you traveled around the world?
Probably more than you?
Probably not, actually.
Okay. So then you should be able to very easily answer. Here's an example of a culture that exists.
Every time I try and answer your question, you keep talking over me.
Well, it's because when you answer, you ramble and say irrelevant things. So my question is...
How can I ramble in half a sentence?
You've been saying plenty of sentences. Do you think the speaking time up to this point is even, or do you think you've spoken more than me?
I have spoken more than you, but I haven't interrupted you.
So then you had an opportunity to speak. You're just not answering my question. So my question is very simple. What's a culture that you feel has been unchanged for the past 50 years? Or what is an example of cultural preservation? I feel like cultures are evolving all the time. It's definitionally a part of culture.
Of course. Cultures are evolving all the time. But if you were to be plonked in 1970s Afghanistan and 1990s Afghanistan and 2010s Afghanistan and 1950s Britain, 1970s Britain and 2010s Britain, there would be common themes that run through both of those places so that you would instantly recognize, I am in Afghanistan, I am in Britain. Would you accept that?
I agree that different cultures are different, yes.
Right, well done. Good. So we've got there then.
Well, you just established that there are. This is like saying
different
that
cultures are different, which means that
that
they
wasn't
have
the
something
question.
about them
Yes, and
that makes them different.
If
right?
you have a brother, both of you will be different for your entire lives. But that
there
doesn't
would
mean,
be a family culture that you have that's different to other families.
But you wouldn't be the same as you were when you were 10 years old.
No,
you
you
would grow
wouldn't.
and change,
Of
right?
course.
So when you talk about
But you're still the
preserving
same
culture,
person, right?
What?
You're still the same person.
Yeah, but you're dramatically changed.
But you're still the same.
No. Are you the same as you were 10 or 15 years ago? What do you mean by that? The same. You're not unchanged, right?
Are you pretending to be a moron, or are you actually being one?
So your claim was that we need to preserve culture because cultures aren't supposed to change.
No, that's not my claim.
Okay, then help me understand. So
I will,
because
if you stop
if you don't
interrupting
remember,
me.
this whole topic started with I'm curious. What is a thing that is precedented? What's the thing that happens continuously through all of history that isn't changing? And then you pointed to the fact that Afghanistan and the United Kingdom have different cultures. Like that's something that I would reject.
No, I didn't. I was just explaining to you what cultures are, which are the cultural differences between groups of people that remain fairly constant over time, despite changing somewhat, as all cultures do.
Your definition of culture is the difference between your culture and another culture?
I gave you my definition.
You just said. You said it was the differences between cultures that change over time that define one culture against another one.
Okay, let's reset.
Okay.
And you talk for a bit, and then I talk for a bit, and then you talk for a bit.
Well, no, because I noticed that
this
this is how it feels like a lot of these types of people, the centrists, the reformers, the MAGA, whatever, is you paint with such broad brushstrokes that by the end of a sentence, I feel like you haven't really said much at all. And I'm just kind of curious why, when you guys speak about things like the preservation of culture, I don't really hear you allude to anything concrete. Or when you talk about wanting to preserve something, you talk about how something has changed. I don't necessarily hear, like, what are the things that are changing that you don't like. You'll point to things like crimes, but I mean, like, crimes are illegal. Obviously, they shouldn't be happening. I just don't really hear anything concrete ever, and it's very unsatisfying to listen to a bunch of people kind of ramble on and on and on without ever having a clear point about what they're talking about. So I guess I'm just trying to figure out, for British or American culture, what are these things that you feel are common, maybe you go back 30 or 40, 50 years, that were common across the whole country that you feel are changing in a way that they never changed in the past?
Okay, done?
Are you going to answer that question? He's not going to answer the question. Go ahead.
I've attempted to answer your question many times, and I'll do so again. However, first of all, am I going to be okay to speak now for a bit? Is that going to happen?
Sure. Can you repeat my question first so I know what you're...
Your question is about what is culture. You brought up crime.
That wasn't my question. My question is, over the past 30 or 40 years, what are things that have changed in American or British culture that you feel over the past 200 years before that were unchanging?
Okay. One of the things that has changed in Britain over the last 30 years is we now have extensive number of Islamist terrorist attacks, mass stabbings, mass rape of British girls by Islamist and Muslim grooming gangs. This is not something that happened in this culture before.
Okay, so sexual assault and rape did happen before in
Did you hear the words I said, or did you?
So you said grooming gangs. I know there's the example from the 80s and 90s with the Rotherham.
They're not from the 80s and 90s. They're happening right now.
What is another grooming gang example? Because I know there are rapes and stuff that happen, but I don't think there are.
Yeah, well, let me explain it to you. So grooming gangs, this is a euphemism that we use to pretend that they're not what they are mass rape gangs where young British girls, usually underage, but also often sometimes young women, would be plied with drugs, plied with alcohol, would be taken from the care homes where they were, predominantly by Pakistani, sometimes other Indian subcontinent Muslims. They would be targeted primarily because they were white and British, so these were racially aggravated hate crimes. And they would be mass raped over periods of years sometimes. That did not used to happen in Britain.
So
that is a cultural change. Can I finish what I'm saying, please?
Okay, you're not going to answer my question. Okay.
I am answering a question.
Well, my question was, what are examples? I don't think this has happened outside of the Rotherham grooming gang, that whole scandal. There have been rapes, there have been gang rapes, but the idea of like a coordinated grooming gang type mass Pakistani targeting British girls rapes, that type of thing is not a thing that I'm aware has been seen in Britain outside of the large Rotherham scandal.
Well, I don't know. I think the fact that somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million British girls might have been raped by these gangs is quite a big deal, and it represents a change in the culture of this country that I think is quite unwelcome.
I never said it wasn't a big deal. I think rape is bad. I just think it's bad when white people do it too. I think it's bad when everybody does it. My understanding is right now for the crime stats in the United Kingdom, it tends to be more white people are even overrepresented in terms of sexual assault and rape. But I'm aware that there are immigrants that rape people as well. I think all rape is bad, but the idea that there is a mass Islamist, jihadist, rape gang-centered thing in the United Kingdom that's functioning,
so
I think
how many girls would have to be raped for you to admit that it's a mass thing?
The question isn't if it's a mass
Well,
thing. The question is if it's organized. You have a huge problem with definitions. I'm sorry, let me try to keep this. You're not understanding. You're not following the conversation.
Stephen,
rape is bad, but organized grooming gang
You've asked
rape
me a
is
lot of
that's
questions, and every time I answer them,
you're
you
not
ignore my
answering really
answer.
at all, but
Now answer my question.
Yeah.
Answer my question. If 500,000 girls have been mass raped in this way, specifically being targeted because they were not of a particular religion or ethnicity, how many of them would have to be treated in this way for you to admit that it's a mass thing? What's the number that makes a mass? Answer my question.
The question wasn't. I don't know how you would identify
Give
a
us a
mass
number.
thing.
Give us a
number. The question was organized
Give us a
grooming.
number. You said
500,001. So you're right. You're right beneath the threshold. Maybe tomorrow you'll have it.
It's actually.
So the question is there
actually
organized?
between 500,000 and a million.
I'll ramble for a second, and then you can ramble afterwards.
So you agree that it's mass.
My issue is because you guys, you do this thing over and over again where you won't accurately identify a problem. You'll invent these things, because rape isn't bad enough. Now it has to be like a mass grooming gang rape thing. And then what happens is you conservatives, you play this game where you falsely identify a problem, you lie to the audience about it, and then you manage to gain power. You go through with some wacky scheme. Go figure, the wacky scheme doesn't fix anything, and then somehow you come back with the same recycled narratives over and over again, asking for another shot at it. It's happening right now with Farage and reform. It happened with Brexit. Brexit didn't reduce immigration. It didn't help you with your economy. It didn't do anything really good for the United Kingdom at all. And then it's happening now with reform coming in and making all of these promises to the British people that you're going to be able to cut all of the revenues coming in. You're going to be able to increase all of your funding. You're going to have a no-wait NHS. And it's all built on the same lies over and over again that didn't help you affect any positive outcomes in the past, and it's not going to help you affect any positive outcomes in the future. You can sit here and you can be upset about it, but I watched you and Matt Goodwin debate on stage where you guys both made the bold prediction that once the Tories were out, your immigration numbers would be over 1 million per year. They plummeted to 300,000. I haven't heard you say anything about that. Your predictions were completely wrong, just as they were with Brexit as well.
Well, that was a wonderful presentation. The problem for you is I voted Remain in the referendum.
Because you hadn't been bullied by the Cambridge students yet. I'm aware of the history, but I know.
So, you've come here with a bunch of talking points. That's great.
Hold on. We can break down
Stephen,
anything you want.
Stop interrupting.
Don't accuse me of having talking points.
Stop
Deal with my
interrupting.
arguments.
Stop interrupting.
Then address what I said.
Stop interrupting.
Address what I said.
Stop interrupting.
Address what I've said.
Stop interrupting.
I believe in you.
Stop interrupting. I let you talk, and I let you make your points. Have some respect for me and for my opportunity to express myself as well. That is how a debate is conducted, so stop interrupting. We started this with a conversation about mass immigration, and I gave you the facts on it, and I defined what immigration is, right? Mass immigration. Now, you're talking about culture. I also explained to you what culture is, and I explained it to you by explaining that it's a continuity of certain things, which may also evolve over time. Now, in terms of your point about mass immigration since Brexit, I was not a supporter of Brexit. I didn't think it was necessarily a good idea. And I agree with you that it hasn't reduced immigration. But I don't see how that's relevant to this conversation. We have had mass immigration happen in this country continually over a long period of time, which has changed the country in the way that I gave you. And I gave you a number of examples, like Islamist terrorism, like grooming gangs and other things, which I don't think you're able to address because they counteract the argument that you keep making, which is, well, nothing changes when you bring in 8 million people over 30 years.
Did I say that?
Can I finish, please?
Did I say that?
Can
Why do you
I
have
finish?
to invent
Can I finish,
points?
please?
You just can't address anything.
Can I
say?
finish, please? If I
Pretend it's
interrupted
a
you,
podcast
if I
episode. Go ahead.
interrupted you every
Make a
time you
position for me.
misrepresent my
Go for
argument,
it.
you'd never talk at
Go
all.
for it. Okay.
So can I finish, please? You made the point that basically what I'm trying to say is, not trying to say, what I'm saying is, when you bring in large numbers of people into a country from a different culture, that will necessarily change the culture. The other thing that I explained to you is, there's been such a large wave of immigration into this country now that has fundamentally changed the sense of British people about the place in which they live. It is affecting the demographic dynamics of major cities in this country and the way people feel about that. But all of those things, the facts that I gave you about immigration, they are what they are. You can think that they're good, you can think that they're bad. That is a separate conversation. The facts are what they are, right? There's also a thing about how British people feel about it. When I came to this country in 1996, 3% of the British public thought that immigration was a major concern. Today, about 65 to 70% of British people say that there are too many immigrants in this country and too many immigrants coming here. Now, I think British people probably have a better idea of how they feel about immigration than you, Stephen, and that is how they feel.
Why do you think over half the British population believes that the majority of the immigrants here today are here illegally, if they've got such a great handle on it or a great idea about what immigration is doing to the country?
The reason that people overestimate immigration is people generally, when asked about things, overestimate pretty much everything or underestimate things terribly because people are not very good with numbers. But the other reason, of course, people aren't able to quote you the exact number of people who
I didn't ask for a quote of the exact number.
You said this earlier, and I'm addressing your broader point, which is why do people misunderstand the immigration statistics, is that people don't look at immigration as this is the number of people who came this year and this is the number of people who came last year. They look at the reality of their lives, they look at the change they see around them, and what they're really concerned about is the cumulative impact of immigration over the period of their lifetime, which, as I explained to you, has been huge, unprecedented over the last 35 years, and will be even more unprecedented in terms of its cumulative impact over the next 35 years. Now, it's true that immigration has come down to 300 or something thousand in the last year. Doesn't mean it will stay that way, but also I never predicted it would get to 1 million. I think Matt did. But the point I would make is the transformation over a 30-year period is what people actually care about, and which is what they're right to care about. Now, as for the point about illegal immigration, yeah, it's true. Illegal immigration is a smaller percentage of the total immigration that we have than legal immigration, but it's still higher today than it was 35 years ago and 30 years ago, which is way too high. Illegal immigration should be zero. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Do we have any final thoughts before we move on to the next?
Yeah, I mean, every crime should be zero, but there's always going to be some amount of crime or some amount of illegal immigrants. I guess the issue I have is that, you say, why do the British people not understand the exact numbers? I didn't ask for the exact numbers. It's like 10 or 11 million to 1 million. There are different estimates from 500,000 to 1.3 million or whatever illegals. That's a big ratio, 10 to 1 to be off by, to assume it's 50-50, or that there are more illegals than there are legal immigrants here. And I think the issue is people in your position, or people like Reform or Restore, depending on how far right you want to go, lie constantly about the immigrant population in the United Kingdom, and then as a result of selling those lies to the people, you get these ridiculous plans or attempts to fix it all in the United Kingdom. And because the problem was never as severe as it was stated in the first place, the problem ends up not being solved, and then you exacerbate other problems. So at the end of the Tory government, with this attempt with like the Rwanda plan, this idea that you're going to ship people to other countries to have them processed first, or with the idea that leaving Brexit would give the UK greater control over their illegal immigrant population. And the reality is it did just the opposite. You didn't have the right to access the same people that would try to claim asylum in the EU, and then if they were rejected once there, to send them back if they came to Britain next. You lost access to a lot of these things. And then the same people that were in charge of pushing those ideas are now telling you and selling you on the idea that reform is going to come in and somehow fix the very same issues that they've been lying about and have failed to fix in the past. And you might hear this talking point, this cope that, well, reform is different. We're not going to be like, the old conservatives. But then you've got, all your politicians are going to be MP Tories that are defecting to join the new Reform Party. So I don't know where all this new blood is going to come from. I don't know. It just seems like a whole bunch of like, here's a fake problem. I'm going to put it in front of you. There is like a real problem here. Regardless of what you said earlier, I don't think rapes are good, mass rapes or normal rapes. I think there should be some probably cap on what type of immigrants and how many should come to the country. I just never really hear a discussion on any of that. I just hear 500,000 British girls have been gang raped by mass grooming gangs, and it wasn't like that when I came over in '96, despite the fact that those Rotherham grooming gang scandals started in the '80s. So I don't feel like I ever hear anything of substance being spoken about.
Well, it's a pity we didn't have someone from Reform on stage so you could rehash your Wikipedia talking points to them.
You're a Reform voter, though, right?
No, I've never
Really?
voted. I've never voted for Reform.
Would you vote for Reform in the upcoming election?
Depends on who stands in my constituency. Last election, I voted for a Liberal Democrat.
I didn't ask about last election. In the upcoming election, will you vote for Reform?
I will probably vote for the same person who's a Liberal Democrat.
Okay, so you don't think you would support the Liberal Reform guy I don't know, in your
Liberal
constituencies.
reform. There's no party called liberal
I'm sorry,
reform.
you won't support the reform candidate in whatever upcoming election. I don't know what constituency you live in.
I just told you that at the last election I voted for Liberal Democrat.
Yeah, I know, but the reason why you're saying that is because you won't answer for the next one.
Stop interrupting.
Tell the question,
Stop
Dodge.
interrupting. Stop interrupting.
Yeah, go for it.
I just told you that at the last election I voted for a Liberal Democrat, and at the next election I intend to vote for him as well.
I'm just curious. You said in the past that you regret, or not that you regret, that you voted Remain for Brexit. Do you think that was a good vote? Do you think you should have remained, or do you think Brexit was a mistake?
I don't regret my vote for Remain, no.
Do you think Brexit was a mistake?
I think it had its negatives and positives, yeah.
Are you sure you're not running for a political party right now? Because that was the most politician answer I've ever heard in my life. Do you think that on net was Brexit a mistake?
Every decision has trade-offs that are positive and negative.
Remember what I said earlier about saying words that mean nothing? Obviously, this is true. But I'm asking, do you think that Brexit on net, was it a mistake?
I think a lot of people think that Brexit ruined the economy.
I'm not asking what a lot of people think. I'm asking you on net. Do you think that Brexit was a mistake?
I think it had some things that made things worse, and I think it had some that...
If you were God and you could choose whether or not the UK voted 51% Brexit or 49% Brexit, what would you push the button to have had them vote? 51% they would Brexit, or 49% and then they would remain in the European Union?
I honestly don't know.
Okay. But so the reason why I ask this question is to illustrate... I ask this question to illustrate how frustrating it is when people like you say things like, well, I voted Liberal last election, or I voted Remain. Okay, you don't stand by that anymore, though. You constantly do this thing. No, you don't. You constantly do this thing where you come on stage, or you go on your show and you'll say things like, I used to be a Liberal, but the Liberals have changed so much, or I used to be a left-leaning person. And the left, I know you've tweeted the dumb picture. I know you've done it. They've changed so much, and now I have to identify with the center-right. I've heard you literally say things like Tommy Robinson makes statements to the left on immigration compared to Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama.
He does.
Yeah, okay.
He does.
I've heard you say statements like this, right? But then when I ask, but then you guys say that everybody else has changed, and then I ask you about your past political votes, you won't defend them. So it seems like you're the one that's changed, which is fine, but you should just own that.
I voted Remain for reasons that were entirely different from the reason that most people voted Remain. The reason I voted Remain is I thought that it would weaken Europe's ability to stand up to Russia. I think I've been proven right on that. And I think the division within Europe has made Europe weaker in terms of its ability to stand up to Russia, and I think we've seen that. So in that respect, I think I was right to vote Remain. What I don't agree with is the narrative that a lot of people like to spin, that Brexit ruined the economy. I don't think that's true at all. If you look at the way other European economies are performing, they're performing even worse than the British economy. So my attempt to give you a nuanced answer is not my refusal to stand by my votes. It's an attempt to use my brain and give you a nuanced answer. Now, in terms of final... Did you want to wrap up and move on?
Yeah, just final thoughts on this topic. That would be great, guys.
So final thoughts on this topic. I would just recap and maybe add one other thing. We have had... a level of mass immigration into Britain that has been extremely disruptive over a fairly short period of time, that has created an environment in which major cities in this country are effectively no longer the domain of the native population of this country, which is very disruptive to the people who've lived here. I'm not one of them. I myself am an immigrant, but I totally recognize that that's happened. I think culturally there have been some terrible things that have happened. I mean, the example of terrorism and grooming gangs is just one of them. But the failure of integration more broadly has been a big problem, to the point where you now saw in the by-election in Gorton Denton, the Green candidate campaigning in Urdu, in a foreign language, in a language not of our country, which I think is a signal of the terrible divisiveness that is we are likely to see in other communities or in other constituencies where some communities haven't integrated at all. And I think what that signals is a democracy works when people vote on the ideas that are being offered to them, not the ethnic and religious background of the candidate or the things that they will tell them. And I think you're increasingly seeing that. So all of these things are big worries to me. And of course, a lot of this would have been much easier to manage if we hadn't also at the same time had the doctrine of diversity, inclusion, and multiculturalism, which have, instead of creating a monoculture into which people are encouraged to buy in and integrate, have instead created a society in which people are encouraged to see themselves as members of an individual community, which I think is essentially the end of a democratic process the way we've understood it to this point. So I think these are all terrible developments, and if this continues, it will only get worse.
Thank you.
I mean, we introduce new things, so I don't know. I don't know what the monoculture is.
How many final thoughts are we going to have?
Well, I mean, when we introduce new concepts like DEI was why Liz Truss, helped 700,000 people come to this country from mainly non-EU places. I just don't know how DEI was the policy there from the Tories that enabled all that mass migration. And when we talk about the monoculture,
you're right,
I don't know about the United Kingdom. I mean, Scottish people don't seem like they share a monoculture with
That's
English
very
people.
clear.
I feel like rural people and city people don't have much of a monoculture. I don't know if they've ever had a monoculture. I know in the United States, we talk all the time about the difference between city slickers and the good old people in the country and doing the farms and everything. But then we're also simultaneously very concerned about demographic change in the cities. But then at every other point, it seems like the country-related people hate the urban-related culture anyway. So yeah, I don't know. It'd be interesting at some point, maybe at some time in your life, if you ever wanted to dive into these issues for real, maybe on your show or with somebody you're more comfortable with who won't challenge you as much. It'd be interesting to hear a conversation about what do these values look like. When you talk about changing culture, and the answer is, well, some people bring crime. That's not culture. That's like changing culture would require you to identify some fundamental aspect of the culture of a country and then change and then to point out to how that fundamental aspect is changing. When you say immigrants are coming and a lot of them commit crime, it's not really a real answer. It's not very satisfying. It's not really getting to the heart of the issues. And
Shall we move on to wokeism?
Sure.
So the question is, speaking of culture, has wokeism caused harm to the political climate?
Do you want to go first again?
Yeah, sure. My question is going to be the exact same as the last one. How do we define wokeism? And can we name like 3 woke policies that we think are destroying Western culture?
Well, you're a participant in this debate, so why don't you define them?
Well, the thing is, I can't because your guys' definitions for everything change at all points in time. That's always the issue. That's always the frustrating thing when it comes to fighting.
Who's us guys?
Conservatives.
I'm not a conservative.
I know you say you're not, but the conservative identification of wokeism and the idea that wokeism, whatever that
forget about conservatism. Let's talk about wokeness. So what would be your definition of wokeness?
In the broadest sense, usually it's social issues that are very, very far left of the norm, I guess. But these positions in the United States at least tend to be held by...
Such as?
It might be certain things related to... I mean, trans people are obviously the hot go-to topic for everybody. It might be things specifically related to trans people. It might be things related to... they call it CRT, now they call it... Or there was affirmative action, then CRT, then DEI. It might be... people who are socialists, about the economy, or whatever that means to people. It really depends on where you're at, who would consider what woke, or what the conservative boogeyman of the day is.
I don't know what the conservative point of view. So your point of view is that wokeness is about trans people and DEI?
That seems to be the case when I look at conservatives.
So that's your definition?
I don't define things as a wokeism. It seems like a really vapid, stupid definition. I would just talk about the issue or the policy itself.
I guess your issue is with the topic of our debate then.
Well, no, because I think that you obsessively talk about wokeism, so it's probably a good thing for us to have a discussion
I'm asking
on.
you to define it so that instead of continually asking me questions and then pretending not to understand my answers, we actually address your argument. So
if you feel like there's an answer I don't understand, you can feel free to ask me to explain your answer. I can do it with ease. They're very simple. You only need the cognitive power of like a 9-year-old to understand them. So
your definition of wokeness is? Again, just coming back to it. So we're clear about what we're discussing.
The median view on social beliefs, the things that are to the furthest left, or the most progressive, the most college student-y, young things, they tend to be around like gender things or minority issues or LGBTQI, whatever status. These tend to be like things that people identify as woke.
So what we're discussing in this section of the debate is whether far-left politics and progressivism has ruined society. Is that the discussion?
Yeah, sure.
What would you mean?
The question was on wokeism.
Right.
The issue is...
And I got you to define it as far-left progressivism.
Yes.
So...
Insofar as I would define it, I don't see it as a major threat, at least to the United States, because I don't think that the people that tend to hold these views have any real political power. It tends to be college kids and people on Twitter. But conservatives are very concerned about this, and they talk about these issues all the time, and then they use them to power their policies that end up being even more regressive than the super woke stuff was progressive, because it wasn't really manifesting in a real way anyway. And now I have a country where half the states don't really have the ability to get an abortion for women because people thought that every 4-year-old was being forcibly transitioned to another gender. It's my issue with it.
Well, that's your country and your issue. But just coming back to our definitions so that we can know what we're discussing. What you're addressing is, has far-left progressive politics had a negative impact on our society? That's how you understand this discussion, correct?
Am I going to say yes here, and you're going to go, I'm glad you agree that wokeism is far left?
No.
Yeah, I guess that would be my understanding of this discussion,
Okay.
yes.
So,
yes.
Good. Now we know what we're actually discussing. So, in terms of its impact, I mean, one of the most obvious things, and I brought
Wait,
up...
what is your definition of wokeism?
I agree with you. I agree with your definition.
Okay. All right. Okay. I think it's okay to agree on a definition to have the discussion, right?
That's why I did it, so that we could agree on the definition.
Oh, okay. It felt a little bit more passive-aggressive than that, but my bad.
Well, that's your bad. Yeah.
Okay, go for it.
I've worked out the tricks that you play, and so I've trapped you in your own logic.
And to be clear, the trick that I just played was asking you for the definition of a term.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. All right,
That's
my bad.
right.
I
That's
know that we
right.
don't like that here.
Exactly
okay, my
right.
bad. Okay, go ahead.
That's exactly right. Because what you do is you don't define it yourself, so that you can then argue with my definition for half an hour, and so we can't have the actual debate. Now be quiet, and
I'll define my terms if you want. Well, I'm only going to be quiet. I'll define my terms if you want me to, but wokeism is the term you guys use.
It took me about 10 minutes to get you to define woke. I'm glad we did it. Now we can have the actual discussion.
Now you can use my definition. I'm glad I could
now
provide
we
you
can
with
have
one.
the actual
Go for it.
discussion.
Okay.
Now we can have the actual discussion. So if your understanding of the question is, has far-left progressive politics made our societies worse? I completely agree with your definition, and I agree with the premise of the question that it has made things worse for a number of reasons. I mean, the trans thing became a big talking point because it's so ridiculous, not because it's so hugely actually impactful on society, although I do think a small number of children being given puberty blockers and an even smaller number of children being given gender transition surgery is a terrible thing that's happened. I think more broadly, though, I mean, one of the most obvious examples is we now have a society which has, I mean, it's not codified and it's not expressed in, in the, like, no one says publicly we now discriminate against these groups of people, unless occasionally they do. So, for example, the Royal Air Force in this country, when they were in a recruiting drive, they were really struggling to get pilots. And there was a woman there who got fired from the Royal Air Force because she refused to go along with the policy. Her supervisor said to her, "We're not hiring any more useless straight white men." She said, "I don't agree with this policy, it's discriminatory," and she was fired. We've had a system of anti-male, anti-white.
Can I just ask a quick question?
No,
So if I were to look
I'm not
that up,
finished
the
yet.
Royal Air
I'm
Force
not
had a
finished
policy
yet.
of not hiring straight white men.
I'm not finished yet.
Is that true?
I'm not finished yet.
Okay. I have a feeling it's not, but okay.
So this is something you can look up. It was covered extensively in the news in this country. Probably wasn't covered that well on Wikipedia where you did the research, but...
No, but on The Sun and all of your
but
favorite publications, I'm sure they talked about it a lot.
No, actually it was covered extensively across the mainstream
and what
media.
they covered was that the Royal Air Force was
Can I
not
finish
hiring
my
straight
points,
white men.
Stephen?
Well, you seem to respond to some things, but not others.
Well,
so that wasn't the policy. I can tell because you're not answering that.
That was the policy that was pursued by the Royal Air Force. It was revealed by this whistleblower who was fired for revealing it. The BBC in this country has internships that are not available to white people. We effectively have created a system of passive, tacit, sometimes open discrimination against different groups of people. And one of the reasons that the sort of reactionary sentiment, which you try and paint me as representing, which I don't, is rising in this country and rising quite quickly, including ethno-nationalist sentiment, is because of this. And the reason I opposed wokeness from the very beginning and far-left progressivism from the very beginning was that it was obvious to me that the number one consequence of pursuing radical left-wing progressivism and racial essentialism of this kind would be that the majority population would begin to pursue identity politics for itself. If you discriminate against white men and say so openly, it's going to be a very short period of time before white men look at that and say, well, if we're now picking people for jobs based on skin color, I am the oppressed minority now, or I'm the oppressed majority now. We need to look after my interests. And the reason you see the reactionary forces rising, both in America, in the rest of Europe, and in this country, is precisely because they've been pushed into this corner by woke leftists. And that is one of the major ways that this movement has damaged our society, as I predicted all along.
So I would say the least impressive thing about conservative predictions is that typically what they'll do is they will build their own enemies, they will cry about the enemies, and then when they manage to convince everybody else that those enemies are real, and then those people react against those enemies, they try to say that, well, it was the enemies in the beginning that caused this particular problem to come about. And I guess the issue that I have is, when it comes to woke-related stuff, it's hard to find ever, like, what are the particular DEI policies or affirmative action policies that we're talking about. It's always some vague allusion to airlines don't want to hire white pilots, or they lower their standards for black pilots, or these things that tend to not exist when you actually dig into them. Now, I don't know, maybe it is the case that the Royal Air Force actually had a policy of not hiring straight white men.
It did, yeah.
Okay, I'll look into that. I'm curious about that. I have a feeling when I look into it, it's going to be completely untrue, like most of the stuff that you bring it up. But I'll look into it. Maybe it was true. And, if it is, I would say that's not a good thing, that you shouldn't be doing stuff like that.
Okay.
But I guess the issue I have is, when we talk about magnitude, I think you said earlier that sometimes people fixate on these issues a little bit too much, but it's because they're such common sense issues. When I look at the United States right now, and I think how many trans people are there, how many people are doing stuff related to trans people, the number of people is incredibly small. It's like 1%. And the idea that would somehow cause so much of a population to become reactionary that, as of 30 minutes ago, I'm pretty sure Iran has tried to bomb like 7 different countries because we have a president who is a madman who is going on a rampage against the entire world insofar as trade and bombs goes. I just can't, in my mind, rationalize how so many of these smart people I'll say in the center like you, who say, well, I can obviously identify that this is a problem. Why don't you ever identify any of these super obvious problems on the right, or any of the super obvious problems that are reactionary to the other things that were reactionary, especially when the issues in the United States on the right are represented through every single pylon of power that the conservatives have, and on the left they're in colleges and on Twitter and Facebook and sometimes in AI world on Sora.
This is an article from Sky News. Could you just read out what it says, please?
So I see the AI summary here is applicants.
Read out the headline.
Well, I don't know if this is a headline or if this is a...
Read out the headline.
Okay, so it says, applicants seeking to join RAF described as useless white male pilots in bid to hit impossible diversity targets. Just to be clear, just so I can understand.
Thank you.
Is this headline the same as no straight white men were hired? Or
No.
they had a policy of not hiring straight white men? Wait. I'm just so curious. Do you understand the difference between somebody not being hired because they're white? Because I'm not going to sit. If you're going to ask me, like, do you think there were ever racist people or even against white people? Of course there are. But you understand there's a difference between the entire Air Force having a policy of not hiring straight white men versus, I guess there was an email where some straight white candidates were skipped over. I don't even know if it was because they didn't meet qualifications or not. They used white men to describe them, but they also called them useless. I don't know if it was because they were white or not. You know there's a difference between those two things, right?
So you don't know this story?
Do you know there's a difference between those two things or no?
Yes, I do. Now,
Okay,
be
thank you.
quiet.
Okay,
Now-
gotcha. Because I was asking for evidence of mine, but you gave me that. So like I said initially, I had a feeling if I looked this up, it wasn't going to be
you ever gonna
what
let
you
me
presented
talk?
it as. Yeah, no, go for it.
Okay. So you just denied the existence of this and you questioned it.
I did not deny the
Stop
existence
talking.
of that, but go
Stop
ahead.
talking.
You seem to have a
Stop
lot of
talking.
trouble following what I'm saying,
Stop
but that's
talking.
okay.
Look, the only way to have a conversation is when people talk in turns.
No, it's not. The only way to have a conversation is when two people are making a good faith effort to understand each other. My question was,
Right.
did the RAF have a policy of not hiring
Yes.
straight white men?
Yes.
You showed me an email that said there were
That they
applicants
had
that
that
were
policy.
rejected that were called useless white male pilots or whatever.
They rejected applicants in a bid to hit diversity targets, which means they discriminated against white men in favor of other groups.
Yes, but that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that in this particular email, but that doesn't mean that they were not hiring any straight white men
I didn't
for some...
say they were not hiring any straight white men. I said they were discriminating against them in favor of other people to hit diversity targets, which were described by the people who were charged with recruiting them as impossible to hit. In other words, they were deliberately undermining both the efficacy and the fair treatment of people in their hiring policies because of DEI.
Okay, so this...
Do you get it now?
The position you have now, yes. And that
Okay,
sounds more
good.
realistic, that there might have been a hiring policy that favored some groups of people that weren't white over the
Right.
white ones
Right.
to cause them to get hired when it might have been in a blind trial the white people would have been hired otherwise. Yes.
Right.
Do you understand that that's significantly different than you saying the RAF had a policy of not hiring straight white pilots? First of all, I don't know what straight had to do with... Are you bi? Do you get like a special application on the...
Well, I'm sure you'd want to know the answer to that question, but
I wouldn't because I would never become British. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
But
So I think I've just... Look, this is why I brought it up, because the idea of a conversation is good faith, but if you question anything that I bring up that you don't know anything about, and then say, well, I don't believe that this happened, and I present you evidence that it did happen, and then you still continue to deny it, I don't see how we can have an actual debate. Now, I never said the RAF hires 0 white pilots. What I said is the policy of discriminating against white men, which has been rife in the rest of society, has created the situation where a lot of people rightly understandably at least, feel antagonistic about it. That was one of the biggest threats with wokeness, and that is one of the biggest challenges where we are. All your points about Trump and all the rest of it, I don't see how it's relevant, and I think we're going to have a section on Trump coming up. I made the point, I think, about trans, that I think the insanity of some of the things we've been asked to believe, which is like, if you say you're a woman, you automatically become a woman. I think people rightly balk against that because it's ridiculous. Doesn't mean it's the number one issue. I've never said it's the number one issue. In fact, I pointed out it's quite a minor issue in terms of the number of people affected by it. But
I'm just curious, in terms of your shows, of all the social issues you talk about, do you think that the trans stuff is at the top 3?
Well, I don't think we've talked about trans for like a year and a half, maybe 1 or 2 episodes in a year and a half.
Okay, do you feel like for conservatives in general in the United States, do you think that trans is one of the top issues that they talk about? On all the reform stuff that I looked at, trans was listed on a ton of it. It was in the manifesto.
I'm not a Republican conservative in America, so I don't know what they talk about. It's up to them.
Well, who would you have voted for in the last American election?
Who would I have voted for? Donald Trump, for sure.
Okay, so I don't know. Okay.
Doesn't mean that you're a conservative Republican.
Of course it does. Definitionally so. You're voting for the conservative Republican candidate.
So if you present me with a small pile of shit and a big pile of shit, and I pick the small pile of shit, you go, oh, you love shit. No.
If the vote is between a guy who resembles the furthest right you can be insofar as how they conceptualize the government
and a guy who has no brain, yeah, I'll go with the guy with a brain.
So
yeah.
Kamala Harris, the person who was a DA in California,
Yeah.
who was Attorney
Yeah.
General in California,
Yeah.
who served as Vice President,
Yeah.
who was a Senator in California, versus Donald Trump, who brags about taking and passing 3 cognitive tests in a month.
Yeah.
The dumb person is Kamala Harris there.
Look, I just explained to you that when you make choices between things, it's not because you necessarily love the choice you're making. If you're forced to choose between 2 things, you choose the one that is the lesser evil, effectively.
Sure. I'm just curious. Over the past...
I agree with a lot of Donald Trump's foreign policy.
Sure, of course you do. I know you do, because you have a conservative view on foreign policy. Over the past 5 years, so you do this thing where you're like, well, I have to choose between 2 things. When you've had this same
That's
choice...
what an election is. It's a choice between 2 things.
Well, not in the UK. You can vote between a lot of things. We have 2 parties in the
Yes,
US, but that's okay.
in...
I can always educate you in your political system. It's fine. But so my question is, of all these things that you have to choose between, at what case in the last 5 years have you leaned to the left on and would vote for the left on versus the right?
I voted for the left. I voted for a Liberal Democrat at the last election, and it's likely that I will again at the next one. I just told you this.
What about in terms of supporting major issues? How many lib-left candidates, I guess, do you guys have on your show, or do you talk to or support?
As many as will come on.
Does that mean 0? Or
no.
How many? Okay, because I know, Farage has been on a ton. I know you've done a lot of content with Goodwin.
Okay, they're not far left, right? But we've
correct.
also
they're right. Yeah,
we've also had
point,
the co-founder of Extinction Rebellion, who's currently in prison for blocking roads, on the show. We've had Aaron Bastani, who's the co-founder of Novara Media, a far-left news organization in this country. We've had a bunch of... I could go down the list for ages if you want, if that's what you like.
I've seen the top 10 lists of the people that you've invited the most on are all generally
we had comedian
people,
Mark Steele, who's a lefty. We had Deborah Francis White from the Guilty Feminist
I'm guessing
podcast.
When you say lefty for these people, they're populist lefties that think that the whole institution is rotted and they don't support actively. So the guy that you just described, is he a Labor voter? Would he support Labor? Has he supported Labor?
Which guy? Mark Steele. He's a lifelong Labor voter.
Okay,
yeah.
Well then you get credit for that one, I guess. Okay, I haven't seen every episode of Trigonometry. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, maybe you should stop opining about who we have on then if you haven't seen every episode of Trigonometry.
I don't think I should have to watch every single episode of Trigonometry to have a
rough
idea.
You should know who we have on the show regularly before you make a judgment.
I have a decent idea.
No, you don't. You've just demonstrated that you don't.
I haven't seen you I demonstrate. I don't know every single person that goes on.
Right.
You haven't made a Twitter video saying,
lefties?
okay, well, call me left-wing now. You did make one saying, well, fine, I'll be right-wing now. Clearly you lean in a certain direction. Clearly people perceive you. Why do you think everybody perceives you as being right-wing then if you're so centrist or you
Why does the BBC
right?
think I'm right-wing?
Why does everybody, on my side at least, everybody perceives you as being right-wing?
Because it's convenient for you, as you've demonstrated in the course of this conversation.
In what way?
I'm about to explain if you just stop talking.
I hope you actually explain.
I will.
Okay, we'll see.
Okay. Can you be quiet while I do?
My mic is down.
Okay, good.
Stop filibustering.
So it's convenient to you in exactly the way that you've demonstrated throughout this conversation, where when I make a good point about anything, you say, you conservatives, and then you pivot to talking about Republicans in America, because it suits you, because then you can argue against things you came here prepared to argue against, instead of arguing with what I'm actually saying.
What is a point you feel like I haven't? First of all, I'm pretty sure the debate topics were related to America. Number one.
Were they?
They were. Number one. That's okay. Number two, what is a question that you feel like you've said that I accused you of being a conservative and then I pivoted and I didn't respond to your point?
Every single thing we've discussed.
Name one of them then.
Every single thing we've discussed.
So you can't think of a single one. What did I not respond to for immigration? You didn't bring up a point. You said a bunch of descriptions. You're like, well, this is true. And then that was it.
You keep talking over me, which means we're not actually having a discussion.
Because I'm asking you for an example and,
and
you're trying to filibuster.
I'm about to give you one if you just stop interrupting.
One point that I didn't respond to.
Can you just stop interrupting?
Go ahead. Give me the point.
Can you just stop interrupting?
I'm not even interrupting. I'm waiting for you to finish.
Not interrupting means when I say something, you don't talk after that. Can you do that now?
Okay. Can I figure out? Okay, go ahead.
There you go. On every single thing that we've discussed, immigration, national identity.
Just one thing. You're not having a conversation. I guess I didn't expect you to check out this early, but I'm asking, is there a single point that you feel like I haven't responded to with substance, and you're saying everything because you realize you don't have an answer for that?
If you want to have this conversation by yourself, you're welcome to. But
I feel like I am.
You are, yeah.
I know I am. Yes, I know I am. I feel that way. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm speaking to the copy-pasted talking points, and I can't get an actual answer out of you for anything. I can give you better answers if you're looking for them. Yeah. It's crazy to me that you guys cry about wokeism and snowflakes and all this stuff so much, but like, you guys do it all the time. You made the claim that I'm avoiding answering any of your arguments because I'm calling you a conservative. I think you are a conservative and I labels you as such, but I'm not dodging your arguments. There's not a point you brought up that I refused to address. That's why I asked you for an example of one, and you weren't able to give one. And that's fine if you're not able to give one, but then don't continue to filibuster and make the claim. Just say, okay, well, I guess maybe that was an unfair thing I said, and here's a point that I'm going to make that I would like you to address. That would be the time where you would say, here's a thing that I brought up, you pivoted and you didn't address that particular thing. That would be a thing you could do if I was actually dodging and pivoting from all your points.
I can't hear any of you. You're going to have to shout louder. Russian agent. What does that mean? So you're saying that because I'm from Russia and I have opinions you don't like, I'm a Russian agent?
Why are we debating the crowd right now? I'm still here.
Is that what
can
you're
saying? Can you really not answer my questions that much?
I'm just not very clear. Is that what you're saying?
Let's not yell out questions from the audience. Let's not get into that. Let's try to let the dialectic get back on track here.
Simple question. What do you feel like I haven't addressed?
Every single thing that we've discussed.
Okay, let's run it down. So you said I didn't address immigration, right? My point on immigration is that you guys have fear-mongered about immigration, and every single policy that you've tried to enact has failed.
Every time you say you guys, you've already lost the argument because you're not arguing with me.
Okay, well, I asked you for a clear stance on whether or not you thought Brexit was good on net. You literally said you would not answer the Brexit question. When I asked if you were God, you could push a button. You literally said, well, I don't know, I couldn't do that.
I said immigration. Immigration, not Brexit, immigration.
Sure. Well, Brexit was a part of the immigration argument, right?
Not for me.
For the majority of the... Oh, my God. I'm sorry. It's okay. What question did you even pose to me with regards to immigration that you felt like I didn't answer? I don't think you even posed a question to me.
What you failed to do... we started this bit of the... just listen, okay? Just put the microphone down and listen.
I'm listening.
Put the microphone down for a moment and listen.
I'm going to hold it right here.
Now you carry on. I'm not going to talk if you keep interrupting me. I'm not interested in this.
Not interrupting
whatever
you.
This is. You are.
I'm literally not. I'm asking you a question. You just refuse to answer. This is the game. How did I do it again? I'm asking you a clear question. You can't give me an answer.
I'm not going to talk to you unless you listen to what I'm saying as well as me listening to what you're saying.
I am listening.
Okay, good. So we started this bit of the conversation, right? Talking about the exchange that we just had. That's what we were talking about, right? And you made your points, and I tried to make my points, and you keep interrupting and talking over me, right? I've addressed immigration, and I've addressed every single other thing that you brought up. And the moment I do, what you do is you say, well, you conservatives say this, you conservatives say that, in order that you can then argue with things that I haven't said. And that is exactly what you've done throughout this whole thing. So when you ask me, why do people say that you're a conservative? It's because it's much more convenient for them than addressing the arguments that I'm actually making. And you've demonstrated that throughout this entire discussion. That answers your question.
Okay, what is the argument that you're making with specificity to immigration? What does Konstantin's ideal immigration policy for Great Britain look like? And who in the past have you supported their vision for immigration to the United Kingdom?
Sorry, because I jumped in, which I shouldn't have done.
Second part. Okay.
Second part.
Yeah. No, who have you supported historically over the past 10 years? Whose idea for immigration, I guess, have you supported policy-wise, politician-wise? Who would you support right now? What is your ideal vision for immigration to the United Kingdom?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So my ideal vision for immigration in this country would be something like probably 40 to 50,000 people a year, highly selective, which means that you really have to qualify in terms of your skill set, ticking all sorts of other cultural compatibility, age, and so all sorts of other things that basically mean you're likely to be a very positive net contribution to the country. You're probably going to have the ability to earn and pay more tax than you receive in benefits over your lifetime. You're unlikely to commit crime. You're unlikely to become a terrorist. You're unlikely to do things that we wouldn't want you to do. You would be highly selective. I think I would definitely prioritize immigration from people, from countries, not from countries really, but from people who already speak the language, who maybe have a cultural familiarity. So Hong Kongers are a good example of this, right? These are people who are formerly part of the British Empire, speak the language, they're able to come over, integrate very easily, and make a good contribution. So something like 40 to 50,000 people a year. But again, you know, it's a democratic thing. So if the British people vote to have zero immigration, that's their right. If the British people want to have 300,000 people come a year, that's their right. The part of the problem we've had with immigration in this country...
Wait, can I ask just for
just let me just finish this bit, and then you can ask whatever you want. A part of the problem we've had with immigration in the last 30 years is, despite the fact that people keep voting against mass immigration of the kind that we've had, they keep voting for parties that promise to reduce it in 2010, in 2015, in 2016, in 2017, in 2019, and in 2024. In all of those elections, immigration was a major issue, and the British people overwhelmingly voted against what we have today. Despite that fact, we've actually had the opposite of what they voted for. So I want managed, highly selective, low numbers, high compatibility, and I want it to be in line with the democratic wishes of the British people.
Okay, so then a statement and then a question. So I would argue that the reason why people have voted for lower immigration and they haven't gotten the lower immigration is because I don't think people tend to vote for higher or lower immigration. I think that people vote for where they feel problems are, and I feel like people sometimes scapegoat immigrants as a class of people for why these problems exist. So if housing is high, you vote for less immigrants. Or if the job market is bad, you vote for less immigrants. Or if the NHS wait times are too high, you vote for less immigrants. Or if Brexit is losing too much sovereignty, whatever, you vote for less immigrants. I feel like when it comes to these issues, the immigrants become this catch-all scapegoat, which I'm not even saying, and again, you can label me however you want, but like I'm not a woke person when it comes to immigration. I don't think there's anything wrong with being selective against certain groups of people. But I think that the reason why there's such this pressure for the government, the majority government, to have more immigrants come in is because they know that as much as people might feel a certain type of way about certain types of immigrants, that the collapse of the NHS or the collapse of the education system or the collapse of the local economy is going to be worse than allowing more people to come in and work those jobs. So I guess my question is, and I'm pushing with a degree of specificity because you speak about these issues a lot, when you say selecting for certain values, like what is it? What would that test even look like when you say selecting for certain values? What are the values that you're selecting for? Number one, and then number two, you mentioned like they have to speak the language and it should be like highly skilled people that can contribute net tax positives to the economy. Let's assume that you met the threshold for all of these things. Why cap it at 30 or 40,000? If they can integrate perfectly, if they speak the language, why not have like 100 or 200 or 300,000 of these people coming in?
It's a very good question. For me, I am less attached to the numbers. I just think where culturally Britain is at the moment is that's what the British people would want. For me, it's the numbers are. Joseph Stalin said quantity has a quality all of its own, and I think there's a truth to that, which is once you have very large numbers of people coming over a short period of time, it is disruptive for the reasons we've already discussed, and it also can put pressure on infrastructure. The reason, by the way, we haven't had the policy on mass immigration that the British people voted for isn't that. I mean, I agree with you. Of course, there are some people who scapegoat immigrants to explain the problems that society has, and I don't agree with scapegoating immigrants. immigrants. That doesn't mean mass immigration is necessarily good. One of the problems with mass immigration is it's effectively been used in Europe to cover up the fact that our economies are not growing. Our economies are shrinking on a per capita basis. We are poorer per capita in this country today than we were before the financial crisis. And the reason we haven't had the policy of controlled immigration that people keep voting for is that bringing in more bodies is the only way politicians can pretend our economy is still growing. That's actually the main reason that this has been happening.
Okay, so I guess my question is, what are the values, or what are the things that you would select for when you talk about like a values-based test for people coming to the country? Like, what are the things that you're talking about? And then also just a comment on, the reason why we're bringing in immigrants is to shore up an economy. I think a lot of that has to do with the boomer generation as well, that you had a lot of people come back from wars, or stay for wars, I guess, for your guys' case, but in the United States we say come back. And then you had this aging population that had a ton of kids, and now these people have all hit a certain age, so you're kind of at this weird demographic age thing, which is why they're bringing in a bunch of younger workers now to kind of fix that issue, because you've got a lot of benefits and, your triple lock pension, whatever else, all these things, Social Security in the United States, yeah.
Well, that's part of it, but the problem is if you're bringing people who are net consumers of tax revenue, then you're not solving that problem, you're making it worse, right? And that's what's been happening in the UK. So when you have mass unskilled or very low-skilled immigration and plus lots of dependents, you're actually bringing in people who are then going on benefits in this country, which I have no idea why it is in this country that we allow foreign citizens to receive benefits. It doesn't make any sense to me. But what happens is you then effectively are bringing net consumers of tax revenues, and you're making that problem worse, which is why I say it isn't that. It's the fact that politicians are able to pretend that we are growing. I mean, the British economy is growing by like 1.1% or whatever it is. It's still not even growing even on that basis. But the reason they bring in lots and lots of people is so that they can add to the total tax base without having consideration of what happens when you divide that by the number of people, which is you're getting poorer.
Okay, so then let's say that everything you just say is true. And I would agree that bringing in people to consume welfare, now I can't speak to the exact immigration schema that you have in the United Kingdom, but let's assume that that is happening, then why not speak to changing those policies rather than attacking the concept of like, well, 200,000 people came in and they're all leeching from the welfare? Why not just say that, if people want to try to immigrate, we'll do this. However, we're going to forbid people from qualifying for this much welfare. In the United States, you have to make a certain amount of money to qualify for visas or, long permanent resident cards, green cards, or whatever. Why don't I ever hear a conversation about that, changing the incentives?
Well, that's exactly what I advocate for all the time. That's literally what I say every time I talk about immigration.
Okay, that's good, but because I feel like I just heard you talk a lot about it, and it was just reducing the number, high-skilled only, reducing the number, but having like a cap on...
The thing you just described is literally what I advocate for on a daily basis.
Okay, I hear you talk a lot about the other stuff, but maybe I've just happened to miss those things.
The thing that what I believe about immigration, one of the problems is, because for the reasons we've already discussed, when you've had this open border policy combined with, the mantra diversity is our greatest strength, you build up a lot of resentment with other people against immigrants. And the reason you see people now on the internet talking about, Britain's been colonized and Britain's been invaded. I don't like that language. I understand why people use it, but I don't like it. And the reason I don't like it is I don't blame people for wanting to come to Britain. Britain's great. Of course they'd want to come here. I believe that what we need to do is change policy so that the British government is doing things that are in the interest of the British people. And it's not in the interest of the British people for us to be spending £14 million a day on illegal immigrants. It's not in the interest of British people to be housing, clothing, and feeding people who've come here from other countries who are not British citizens and who are not paying tax here. We shouldn't have foreign nationals in social housing. We should not be providing benefits to foreign nationals. And I say this as someone who was very poor and a foreign national for quite a significant portion of my life in this country. So I advocate for sensible policies on immigration, on what happens when you get here. That is my position, which is why, with all respect, I'm glad a normal conversation has broken out between us, despite the conversation we were having earlier, because this is the reason I don't subscribe to political parties and this sort of team-based agenda, because every political party has lots of things about its policies that I don't like. I don't like lots of things about left and right political parties. I like to advocate for the things that I believe are positive for this country. I think a positive, carefully selected immigration policy and then putting the interests of British people who are already here, who are nationals of this country first, is exactly what we should be doing. So
Sure.
I'm glad we agree on that.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily disagree with anything you've said, but one of the issues with the statement of like I don't subscribe to a certain political party, I think that you can have a constellation of ideas that don't map cleanly onto some side, but when it comes down to elections or when it comes down to pushing people to vote in an election, you kind of have to choose a party or you have to choose a person. Things have to collapse into one choice.
Sure.
And I guess, I mean, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but the feeling that I get from you, from the things that I've heard you say is that if I were to look at the past 20 years of British politics, and if immigration was a huge issue that I had with this country, I feel like the Conservatives have failed monumentally in dealing with the immigration issue.
Of course.
I feel like
just like Labour before them. Yeah.
Sure, but I feel like the prediction was that Labour was going to continue to fail massively on it, and it seems like Labour hasn't failed. It seems like Starmer, for all of his faults, I know you guys all hate him, but it seems like his government has done a good job at cutting heavily into the amount of immigrants coming over, cutting heavily through the backlog of asylum seekers that you had that the Tories refused to deal with. But now, on the eve of all these Tories beginning to look like they're going to flip to reform, I feel like all of the people who are opposed to the mass migration or mass immigration narrative are going to try to support reform when all of these people have seemed to fail to deliver on these reduction of immigration promises over and over and over again, and that's just very confusing to me. I don't understand that.
Yeah, well, let me explain it to you. I mean, it's a fair critique. So, first of all, the Labour, your point about, Labour Party is reduce the numbers, it's not quite how it works, but yeah, the numbers are lower. They're still very high. I mean, this is why I kept bringing up the point about what was happening in this country 30 years ago when I first came here. The numbers of people coming then were about 40 to 50,000 a year. 55,000, I think, in 1996. It's still like 300-something thousand now, which is way too high, particularly given the cumulative impact of mass immigration that we've had. So both Labour and not both Labour, the Lib Dems and the Conservatives have all failed on this. All the mainstream politicians have failed on this for the reasons that I gave you.
Sure.
And let me address the point about
right?
reform.
Like
let me address
the Labour or the Conservative Party, the Tories failed far, far, far more.
No, it started with the Blair government. So more people came under the Blair government. Let me just lay this out.
I agree. We're going Boris wave after. It seems like the Tories failed hardcore.
They both failed in exactly the same way.
Okay, so you would say as of right now, if you could flip a coin and have the Tories continue, okay, versus the Labour government, that they would both perform the same on immigration?
I think probably very likely similar. Yeah, absolutely.
How would we feel that way? What's the evidence of that?
Sorry?
Why would we feel that way? What would we look to in reality that would inform that?
I think the numbers were going to come down, whoever was in charge. I don't think the numbers this year have come down because the Labour government has come in. I think they were likely to come down anyway. My point is something else. Immigration under both governments is way too high, particularly given its cumulative impact over time. But your point about a few Tories defecting to reform, it's not all these Tories. It's like 3 or 4 people in terms of the MPs. They were all people who would have been pretty hawkish about immigration and when they were in power tried to do something about it and were prevented from doing anything about it by their own party, which is why they're now moving to reform. So yeah, I voted... I think I voted for the party I voted most for in my life are the Liberal Democrats. Second most would be Labour. I think I might have voted. Yeah, I think I voted Conservative once, and yeah, I've never voted Reform. So,
okay, I guess when I look at, so here's a question. I guess when it comes to the immigration thing, let's say that for the next 5 years. We could float this idea of capping immigration at 30 or 40,000 per year to the UK, but it would mean I won't say severe, but somewhat of a degradation or a continued degradation of the services that the NHS provides, and then an increase in the cost of education, that the costs are going to continue to go up, but we can cut the amount of immigrants coming in as a result of that. Do you think that's a trade? Is it a trade that you would support? And do you think it's a trade that most British people would support?
I definitely think it's a trade that most British people would support, but I also don't think that that is actually what would happen. I mean, first of all, given the decline in birth rates that we are now seeing, schools are shutting anyway, so you don't need foreign foreign teachers to teach British children. That's not really happening. In
Well,
terms
like
of
foreign students for money, right?
Hold on, but you mean for universities?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, foreign students are coming in and paying fees and then going back to their country. I think it's totally fine. I've got no problem with that. We're exporting a British service. No issue with that at all. But in terms of the NHS, I do think it would have a short-term impact on the NHS, but we have to train British people to do those jobs, inevitably so. And that short-term impact will be disruptive, but it will be worth it. But my broader point to you about mass immigration beyond specific shortages in specific industries, which, by the way, are exaggerated. You've got to remember, right, in what is effectively a market economy, when you have a shortage of labor, what that does is it increases the wages that people are willing to offer people to do those jobs, and that then creates more people who come in and do those jobs. So,
but it also increases the cost of those services.
Yeah,
right?
of course, but because British people are being paid properly to do those jobs, to me that's a trade-off that's perfectly worth it.
The cost will ultimately rise more than there will be a concentrated industry that might be paid a little bit better, but the cost overall of the things, so like the NHS,
wages
would
for
increase.
British people will go up, which will help them to be able to afford other things that they want, right? I am perfectly happy for British NHS staff and doctors to be paid better. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Well, I think the question would be, is it worth the trade-off of a degradation of NHS services, which is what would happen.
I don't know that it would lead to long-term. I think short-term, of course, it would be disruptive. I don't think long-term it would lead to a degradation of NHS services at all. You would have a highly paid workforce of British people who are trained in this country to be doctors and nurses. I think that would be incredible, and that's what we should be aiming for. But the broader point I'm making to you is take the NHS and other shortages that you might create in this way out of it. The bulk of the people who've come over the last 30 years are not supporting themselves financially to the point where it's worth our time bringing them in. And that's the problem.
Even the bulk of the legal immigrants, you don't think are worth it financially or economically?
The bulk of the wave of low-skilled and no-skilled immigration and dependence that we have had is not economically beneficial to us. We should be welcoming people in who are economically beneficial. And as part of the wave that we've had over the last 30 years, some of those people have been economically beneficial. Great, let's bring those people in, but let's not bring in hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who are net takers of tax revenue and also are more likely to be doing other things that we don't want.
So let's do final thoughts.
Just a quick question. What do you think then is the incentive of a conservative government to bring in more immigrants, if not to desperately fill jobs that they feel the economy is going to be lacking?
We talked about it earlier, didn't we?
Well, yeah, but when I
pretend the economy is growing when it's not. That's the incentive.
But if they're net takers of everything, wouldn't this would increase your debt and your deficits?
No,
it would
what
hurt
happens? Well, no, what happens? The way to think about it is like this. Let's say that you're a family, you've got a wife, 2 kids, right? And you have a total household income of £100,000. Okay, and your wife says we need to grow our household income. Let's bring my parents in. Let's bring the in-laws in. They earn $20,000 a year collectively together. So you bring in, now your household income is 120,000, except you now have to divide it among 6 people instead of 4 people. That's what they've done. They are the wife that says, let's bring the in-laws in so we can pretend our household income is growing.
I understand the analogy, but I feel like it would be more you have a household of 4 people, and then there's also some kind of work that needs to be done. Maybe you need grandma to knit, and you need grandpa to mow the grass or something. And if you can't afford to do it, you have to hire out somebody else to do it.
Yeah, but you can't pretend you're getting richer. You're getting poorer because you now have to feed 2 more people.
Yeah, but if you didn't bring those people in, the cost for everything would be so much higher that at the end of the day...
It wouldn't. It wouldn't.
Okay. This is a mean question, but just to push, because it's frustrating because, but in every single part of the world where this is tried, it is the case that bringing in even low-skilled immigration bolsters every part of your economy, with some exceptions, especially in Europe and the UK, where you have weird rules around like asylum seekers not being allowed to work for a year for whatever reason, which I think is a whole other issue to bring up. But this idea that if we just cut off immigrants, all of our native people can just work these jobs and it'll be fine. Like, I hear this rhetoric from so many people all over the world, and this has never worked anywhere ever.
Well, if bringing in 8 million people, as we've done, boosts your economic growth, then why aren't we growing?
Well, I think Brexit hurt quite a bit. Number one. I think number two.
We're doing better than other European countries, which, by the way, have also done mass immigration. The reason our economy isn't growing...
I'm pointing it out. Your goal wouldn't be to other European countries. Your goal would be compared to where the United Kingdom could be otherwise. And I know that for all of your issues with EU immigrants from Eastern Europe or whatever, you've basically replaced all of those now with a high amount of just Indian and Pakistani immigrants, which earlier seemed like the ones you had the biggest problems with. So it seems like in terms of immigration or getting the types of labor that you would want to this country, that was pretty significantly impacted.
Brexit didn't do on immigration what people wanted it to do.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons I didn't vote for it, just remember.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, should we move on?
All right, yeah. Let's move on to the next topic. Is Trump's approach to political issues dictatorial or reflective of democratic consensus?
Yeah, I think, almost definitionally, Donald Trump views himself as a guy who should be able to operate the entire executive branch just through the White House. There's a number of examples of this. I mean, we can run through any of these. I'm not entirely sure what your position would be on this. I'd be surprised if it was anything different, but yeah, you can tell me. Or I can define more things or whatever if that would make you comfortable first, I guess.
Well, yeah, maybe you can define dictatorial for us, actually.
Sure. So when I think of dictator, I think of single man type rule, where there's a single person who feels like they have more legitimacy, well, I would say than the other branches of government, but he would be the government essentially. So I would say examples of this are the way that Donald Trump treats his Supreme Court. I would say that the way that he's...
Stephen, I'm sorry to interrupt. Just define, I just couldn't quite hear it. So
Sure.
It's a single person who feels he has more legitimacy?
More can enact power through his will alone, basically.
His will alone?
Yeah.
So he doesn't have to follow the law?
He feels like he's above the law.
He's
Yeah.
above the law. He feels or he's acting like, somebody in the audience might feel like they're above the law, but it doesn't make them a dictator, right?
No, but it would make them dictatorial.
If someone in the audience thinks they're above the law, that would mean they're dictatorial.
Yeah, it would be a dictatorial personality. They might not be a dictator because they don't have the power to be a dictator.
Okay. And if someone is, say, the president, and they can be voted out, and they will be voted out, would they still be considered dictatorial?
Yeah, they could be dictatorial. Yeah, of course.
Even if they can be voted out?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
To me, a dictator is someone who just basically retains power, including by force. If you can be voted out, how can you be a dictator?
Well, I mean, you have some people who will change their voting systems in order to be elected over and over
like
again.
Vladimir Putin, fair.
Sure.
So
Or
Putin
Evo Morales.
is a dictator. Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
But if you can be voted out in a free and fair election, then can you still be a dictator?
You could. I mean, you could nominate the next person in line to be the next king or president. I think that Donald Trump,
That's why I said free and fair election, right?
Sure, which, I mean, they're also trying to actively impede right now. But do you think that if Donald Trump was 20 years younger, he keeps making these references to running for a third term, do you think he would try to run for a third term?
Yeah, I think the fact that he keeps referencing a third term is a disaster, and I think he should definitely stop doing that.
Yeah, I think it's dictatorial.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So I say he's a pretty dictatorial guy, yeah?
I think that... See, here's the issue with that, right? Is Trump talks a lot of shit, and he likes to piss people off. And so he says these things, and you kind of go, well, it's 99.999% that he's trolling.
Wait, is it though?
Hold on. Just let me lay out my argument. We've established that we're actually able to have a conversation, so let's have one. So 99.999%, this is my assessment anyway, he's trolling. 0.0001%, shit, he's talking about a third term. Not good. And I regard, particularly given what happened on January the 6th, the fact that he keeps referencing a third term as a problem, and as something that indicates that the risk of him trying to do whatever it is he might do when that happens is non-zero, which to me would be absolutely dictatorial. However, I do lean on the idea that it's probably just trolling. In terms of everything else he's doing domestically, what I see is the American system of checks and balances working as intended. He is doing things, some of them are illegal. The legal system pushes back against that. The Supreme Court, in which 3 of his own appointees sit on, and 3 of the other 6 are Republican-appointed judges, regularly and repeatedly deny him the opportunity to do things that he wants to do. That, I think, is how the system is supposed to work, isn't it?
So, no, but I would also say that for the first part, I don't know where 99.999% of Trump's statements are trolling. I don't know where that comes from. I feel like...
That specific statement about third term, I suspect is 99.9% trolling. That's
But you
what
said
I
earlier, if he was young enough, he would run for a third term.
No, I didn't say that.
Oh, I thought you said you feel like it would.
No, I didn't
Okay.
say that.
Do you think that if he was 20 years younger, do you think he would try to
what
run
I
for a
was
third
saying was,
term?
I agree that him talking about a third term is a worrying thing that he should stop doing. That's
Sure.
what I agree with.
Okay. That might be that on that issue, but then there are a load of other issues where it seems like he feels like he alone is entitled to make these decisions that nobody else ought to have any oversight over. So, for instance, this idea that the president has usurped from the Congress the ability to do tariffs and worldwide economic policy that's a pretty uniquely Trump thing, that you can levy tariffs across every other country in the world. The Supreme Court has finally checked him a bit on that power. Now he says he's going to go elsewhere and try to do the exact same thing. So it seems like we're just going to have a back and forth on this, maybe until he's out of office.
But sorry to interrupt, but just I think this is worth double clicking on. That's why I said that is the system working as intended. So American democracy is robust and strong because when the president tries to do things he's not allowed to do by law, the legal system prevents him from doing that. Right?
No. So I think that the American system is strongest when everybody is trying to act in good faith within the bounds of the system. I don't think continuously.
When was the last time that happened?
Joe Biden. I mean, if you want, we can run a whole host of issues. So I would look at like the weaponization of the Department of Justice by Donald Trump, I think is a historically crazy thing by a U.S. president. If you want to give me any examples that you feel would stack up to that between Biden, Obama, and the Clintons over the past 30, 40 years.
I didn't say that Donald Trump is not doing things that shouldn't be challenged legally. What I said is I think it's the part of the American system that all these different branches compete for power in the way that has been prescribed in your founding documents. And that is an ongoing process that has been going on for 250 years. There's definitely criticisms that you could make about Trump. I think there's plenty of criticisms that people could make about previous presidents of both Democratic and Republican. What I'm saying is, whatever you may think about Donald Trump, I don't think American democracy is a threat because the system is working as intended. And if he was truly dictatorial, the signal for me of a president being dictatorial is when they override the checks and balances that exist and begin to effectively break the system. I don't think that's happening.
But he's been doing that, right?
On the contrary, what's happening is every time he goes too far, the system that is in place holds him accountable and prevents him from doing what he would otherwise like to do.
Well, so prevents is the wrong word to use because oftentimes they have to check after the fact. So he's already done
that's how the system works, right?
Not ideally. You don't have a guy who's trying to break the rules over and over and over again and then getting checked and coming back.
But
and then
the system works in that way with every president that you've ever had,
but
right?
When you have
they do something, then they get sued, then they have to change the policy that they've
Generally, no. Generally, you consult with the people within your executive branch to see if you feel like you have the legal authority to do said thing. If they feel like you have the legal authority to do said thing, then you try to do said thing. If the courts check you, you accept the court's answer, you move on. But Donald Trump, more than any president in my lifetime, tries to circumvent the other branches, not utilize even his Republican majority Congress, chastise and attack his Supreme Court when they don't give him the specific rulings that he wants. And then when he's ruled against, he constantly openly flirts with the idea of either defying the Supreme Court or going around it using any other number of things that they know will also be ruled as unconstitutional. But the problem is the damage is already done.
He follows what the Supreme Court says, right?
I don't think it works that way. It would be like saying, like, if somebody doesn't want you to beat you up and they stop beating you up 10 minutes into you asking, I'm saying, well, they eventually listened, right? Well, I mean, the damage is already done.
Well, the damage is not already done in that they can't pursue the policy that they were pursuing prior to
Well, the
that
damage
point,
is already done, though, right? So, for instance, for tariffs, he's collected some $200+ million of tariffs. He's irreparably harmed our trade relationship with basically every other country, including the United Kingdoms, on the planet. We've got people, DACA kids, we just recently found out, I think yesterday, have been deported from the country who were never supposed to be. You've got 2 American citizens that were murdered by questionable, at best, deployments of ICE. You've got the president illegally deployed the National Guard and military to states like California. Like, the damage is already done on that. The court eventually says, hey, you weren't allowed to do that. And Donald Trump goes, oh, cool, I'll find another way to get around this in the future. I don't think, especially an executive, which is the scariest thing because the executive is the guy who's supposed to enforce the laws, him continually skirting or going over these guidelines over and over and over and over and over again in so many historically unique ways, and then saying, well, eventually the court said, hey, that thing that you did 2 years ago that you've already politically and financially benefited from, you weren't allowed to do that. I don't think that's a good system. I feel like it's a dictatorial guy.
Well, Look, it's not for me to comment on whether the American system of division of power is good or bad. It is what it is, and what I'm saying is that system seems to me to be standing up pretty well on balance. Doesn't mean that there aren't individual things that you might not agree with. For example, if I don't want to speak about America because it's not my country and it's not from. I don't vote in America. I don't live there. I visit a lot and I like it, but it doesn't mean that I get to sort of say. But if Britain was deporting people to a third country without due process, I would be against that, right? So you can deduce from that how I feel about the United States doing that. I would be totally against that. However, there is a system of checks and balances in the US, which is when the president does something which is, or anyone does something which is found to be illegal, you have to go through the courts. And the question for me is, has America become a dictatorship, which is what I think the important question is, right? Somebody can have all the tendencies they want. The question is America in a position where its leader is able to do whatever he wants and ignore the law? I don't believe that's happening. And is America in a position where its leader will not democratically allow the next freely elected person to take power? Is America in a position where that's not going to happen? I don't think that's the case either. I think power will be handed over peacefully and democratically. And I think the President of the United States is not unrestricted by the law in terms of what he's able to do. So to me, that's a reassuring thing.
Do you think a dictator thing is only bad at the very microsecond it becomes a dictator? Or do you think that all of the steps leading up to it are maybe a cause for concern? Because when we say that there will be free and fair elections, I'm fairly certain that that's the case. But you have the president right now weaponizing his Department of Justice to attack states to look for evidence of fraud in the 2020 election, a case that he's lost in front of courts and to the public and to his own prior administration over and over and over again. Or you've got the president of the United States who's already benefited financially, massively, that the tax department has from collecting revenue from tariffs, which was a thing he knew he never should have done, but he did it, and he's continuing to do it in other ways, and the court will probably rule against him there. Insofar as being able to break the laws or whatever, you have a president who has now been granted immunity from committing all crimes as a result of a bizarro Supreme Court ruling. So in a way, that's a uniquely new thing that Donald Trump has been granted, the ability that once he commits a crime, it can never be questioned or talked about because he's the president of the United States. So, I mean, in some ways, he literally is committing crimes that, or he can commit crimes that he can't be ever held accountable for because of new precedents that have been created to protect him as the president of the United States.
Sorry, what were your questions? You made, I think, 3 questions.
So basically, I think that the idea that he's not a dictator yet, because we might have the next free and fair election, when it seems like every part of his administration is through multiple vectors trying to attack free and fair elections, to say, well, as long as the courts, eventually course correct that it's not a dictatorial thing, I just think it's a very naive reading of how democracies can fail.
Well, I don't, sorry, in terms of just say that last bit again,
I think that a guy who is in bad faith attacking all of your democratic norms as the executive is a uniquely scary thing. In the U.S., we call it a constitutional crisis. That's a uniquely scary thing, and Donald Trump has shown a penchant for a willingness to do this over and over and over again. And just because he's not at the point where I am a dictator, angling himself and doing everything he can to get to that point, I think that interim period is worth criticizing. I'm not against criticizing any president or prime minister or leader of any country. I think, it was somewhat humorous to some people, but I genuinely believe that there are good and bad sides to every person and every decision and so on. So there's plenty to criticize every leader of every country for. President Trump is no exception to that. There's lots of things I don't agree with him on. There's lots of things I agree with him on, as with every other person. But to me, words are important because they have certain definitions. You don't say that someone is pregnant until they've actually become pregnant. In the same way, I wouldn't call someone a dictator until they are a dictator. That does not mean that you can't say, well, deporting people to a prison in a country to which they've never been is not something I want the leader of my country to do. That is not something I want the leader of my country to do. And that is something that I would want the judicial system of my country to challenge the leader on doing and prevent them from doing in the future. That's my view on it. Do you think that Donald Trump is uniquely dictatorial in his search for power in the United States? And then if your answer to that is no, in what ways are Joe Biden or Barack Obama or Bill Clinton, in what ways did they test the power of the executive in the ways that Donald Trump has? Maybe using the example of the weaponization of the Department of Justice.
Truthfully, I just don't know enough about all the history of the American presidents to be able to make a good comparison between all of them. So I just can't say.
So are you neutral on that, or do you think
it's not that I'm neutral? I'm uninformed about it.
Okay.
I try not
if I were to tell you that Donald Trump has told his Department of Justice to go after individuals using a prosecutor that he said that he truthed out, that this is a thing that no U.S. president in my lifetime has ever done, would you agree that that's like a uniquely bad way for him to weaponize his Department of Justice?
If that is all true, I just don't have enough detail to be able to comment on it properly. I mean, I think if you had a Republican here, they probably start talking about the fact that the Democrats tried to put Trump in prison, and their view of that would be that that is equivalent, right?
Sure.
There's
a fact of the matter, though.
I don't know enough about it to say which one of those cases is true. I try not to comment on things I don't know enough about.
Okay.
But I don't see. I think the conversation we're having here is Donald Trump dictatorial. It's not my impression that he is, and more importantly,
how can it be your impression that he's not if you don't have any concept of historically what presidential actions have been in the United States?
You're totally right. It's my impression, which is why I said it's my impression. It's not my hard-held opinion based on the facts.
What would be a line in the sand for you, or a thing that if you saw Donald Trump do it, you'd be like, ooh, that's a pretty scary...
If he used force to prevent the legal system of the United States from enacting its will, or if he prevented a free and fair election from taking place, or the freely and fairly elected candidate of whoever's next from taking power.
So when Donald Trump, I think he wrote an executive order, when he's talking about utilizing ICE to help the states manage their polling stations, would that be an example of that? Because these are things he's already said he wants to do. In the United States, our individual states all run their own elections. It's a very big deal for all of them. The federal government doesn't intervene in that traditionally, but Donald Trump has been on record now saying multiple times that he would like to have more control over elections in the states.
Well, it depends what those ICE people do. If they're stuffing ballots into voting booths, then yeah, that'd be a problem. If they're preventing people who are not citizens of the country from voting, I think that would actually help election integrity. So it depends what they're actually doing.
So I mean, it's not like Donald Trump is going to say we're going here to prevent people from voting, right?
I'm not saying it's about what he'd say. I think it's about what he'd do. So if the ICE agents are there to prevent non-citizens from voting, I think that helps election integrity.
They don't even have a mechanism by which
if the ICE agents are there to prevent people from voting who should be voting, or if they're stuffing ballots into voting booths, then that's a different conversation.
If a state explicitly says, we don't want ICE here, we don't want the federal government intervening in our state elections, and Donald Trump says, I'm going to do it anyway for election security, would you agree that that would be highly problematic and somewhat dictatorial?
Well, it depends on what the reason is for the state to do that. If the state is doing that to ensure that non-citizens vote, then no. If the state says that for other reasons, then yes.
Well, they're never going to, even if they were doing it to ensure non-citizens vote, they're never going to say that, right?
Right.
And then if Donald Trump is doing it for election security, he's never going to say...
But if that was the rationale for them doing it, then I think you'd want somebody to prevent non-citizens from voting, wouldn't you?
Yeah, but it would be up to the state to enforce that, number one.
What
and
if the state refuses to enforce that because it's in their electoral interest to do that?
I mean, it would be up to the people of that state to vote, to have their state do something different in terms of the accountability. That's just how our system works.
Okay.
But I mean, like, given that I know that Donald Trump has tried to interfere with elections in the past, why would I even trust his administration to do anything related to election integrity, utilizing federal officers, even if he said that that was his intention? I feel like just seeing him send those agents to any state just in and of itself would be enough to say this is a dictatorial action.
Well, no, your suspicion does not make it dictatorial. But yes, I agree with you. January the 6th was not a good look, and it created a lot of doubts in a lot of people's minds about his intentions when it comes to accepting the results of elections. Democracy depends on losers' consent, and when people lose, they should accept it. But you can also see it from the perspective of someone who might say, well, if you've got a situation where there seems to be, you tell me if this is wrong, but there seems to be some kind of, inexplicable desire to have people vote without ID, or to have people vote who may or may not be citizens, that would also make you question election integrity. And I think people are totally entitled to question it and then act accordingly. So
they are, but the process is to vote on your state. Then if you want to have a different requirement for identification at the time you go to vote, you need ID to vote in the United States, just not when you go to the ballot to vote, but to register to vote and everything, you have to show an ID. Which I think it was like that even in the UK up until I think a few years ago. I think you didn't have to show a voter ID.
You still don't.
Oh, you still
So
don't?
it's a problem, and
I
that's
thought that
something we
changed
need
recently.
to fix as well.
Yeah, so I'm saying that but in the United States, it would be up to an individual state to fix what they want. The president coming in and deciding that he wants it to change, and then given his whole history with election conduct, it doesn't seem like it's coming from a place of good faith. That would be a thing it does right now worry me as a U.S. citizen. You've seen him invade Georgia right now with his FBI to seize voter information from 2020. And you've seen he's got an entire cabinet. His whole cabinet has refused to even concede that he lost the 2020 election, which is kind of insane given that we were supposed to be a bastion of democracy and everything, the leader of the free world in terms of liberalism and democracy. So, yeah, I don't know why I would ever be okay with the president overstepping his boundary with federal officers to go into states and enforce stuff and not see that as anything but dictatorial.
Well, as I say, I think you have a legal system that will ensure that the law is ultimately followed, and that's what differs it from a dictatorial system like the one that I lived in for some time, first in the Soviet Union and then in Russia, where you actually have a situation where you cannot remove a person who's in power from power. And so I just insist on defining words in the way that I think is accurate, which is a dictator is someone who cannot be removed from power and who's deliberately using force to violate the law. That, to me, is what a dictator is. Someone can have dictatorial tendencies. I mean, I might have dictatorial tendencies about parenting, whatever. That doesn't make me a dictator. Right?
No, but if you were the president of the United States, I would be really scared about your dictatorial tendencies.
No,
and
I
the fact
agree.
that Donald Trump has already embarked on so many horrendous actions that have been contrary to every president
But as
prior
I say,
to him.
I think he is constrained, rightly, like all previous presidents, by the system of checks and balances that you have. The executive will always strain to exceed its authority, and there will be other branches of government whose job it is to restrain them and to use their power for their own agenda. That's just how
I understand
it
what you're
works.
saying, but I mean, with President Trump, it has been unique. It has been a unique stretch in almost every single realm regarding executive authority. So,
But he is following the law
No,
once
he's
the
not.
judgment... Which laws is he not following? Once the Supreme Court says this is a thing you're not allowed to do, he still carries on doing that thing?
No, but if they say that
Well,
it's not a
that's
thing
what
that
I'm
he's allowed to
saying.
do, then he broke the law up to that point.
Okay, but the moment... Well, but if I don't know... If I'm doing something and I don't know that whether I'm allowed to do it or not,
Yeah,
right?
what would
And
happen to you?
And someone comes in and says, you're not allowed to do this, and I stop doing it, isn't that me, in fact, the system working as intended?
No, because what would happen to you if you did that?
I would go...
Exactly. There'd be accountability. You'd go to jail probably, right? If you were
Or
doing
I pay
something
a
illegal.
fine or whatever,
Yeah,
right.
exactly. There'd be a punishment.
Right.
For the executive, there is none.
Well, of course, because the executive is not a person. You can't put the executive in prison, right?
Well, because they're the people that put people in prison.
No, because it's about policy. It's about policy implementation, not personal behavior, right? That's the difference.
I mean, for Donald Trump, it is personal behavior, but I'm just saying that the idea that when you say the law is working as intended, if I were out setting buildings on fire and then a police officer came up to me and said, sir, we evaluated the last 20 arsons you did and we've decided they were all illegal, and I say, oh, okay, I'm going to stop setting buildings on fire,
Yeah.
you would never describe me as somebody who is following the law because once I was told I wasn't allowed to do a
Yeah,
thing.
that's fair. But this
Yeah.
is where the analogy between the person and the executive breaks down, right? Because the president is testing where the law is and finding out what he isn't allowed to do. And the Supreme Court's job is to adjudicate on whether what he's doing is compliant with the law or not.
I think there are
not like
worlds-
he knows that you're not supposed to set a building on fire and then goes and sets it on fire. He is questioning the way that the system should work. He implements a policy. The Supreme Court says, you're not supposed to do this. He stops doing it.
I think
That's
there's
the
a
system
world
working
where
as
that
intended.
can be the case, and I think
Right.
there are times where a president has tested where they feel, when Biden tried to do mass student loan forgiveness, there was a student education bill that gave the president pretty broad powers to forgive student loans based on like disaster stuff, and he thought for COVID he could. And I think that there is an argument on both sides where it's like, well, that would be way too much for Congress to grant without like more specific legislation. Or, you know, yeah, I think he actually was allowed that power. I think you could have a reasonable disagreement there in terms of what the president could do. For Donald Trump, the idea that I could tariff the entire planet without congressional approval ever, or that I can go to war with whatever country I want to without approving anything with the Senate, or that I could tell my Department of Justice to target individuals with what we all know are essentially fabricated indictments about mortgage fraud because they're all political adversaries of his. You know, with issue after that, I can invoke the Alien Enemies Act so that I can more quickly deport Venezuelans because I'm trying to claim that Venezuela is actively invading the United States of America because they have gangs there. I don't think that these are good faith tests of the law. There's just a guy breaking the law and then giving some pretextual basis for why they were allowed to do the thing that they did.
We have 15 minutes left, gentlemen, wherever you guys want to go.
Fine. I think we just disagree fundamentally. To me, the question is America becoming a dictatorship? From what I observe, I don't see that.
Okay. Why do you think? Do you agree that if you could push a button right now to vote for Trump or Kamala Harris a year ago, my guess is you would probably favor Trump?
Well, I don't know what Kamala Harris would have done with this year, but probably, yeah.
What do you think Donald Trump did over the past year and a half, or what policies does he have versus Kamala that you think made Trump a superior candidate or do better than Kamala would have?
I think, look, again, I come back to this thing about the fact that I'm not an American citizen. So my judgment of President Trump is not the same as an American citizen. An American citizen will care about the cost of living in America, about immigration into the United States. These are things that don't affect me, that I don't care about, right? Because I don't live in America. So for me, I can't judge him on that. I can judge him on the things that affect people in the rest of the world. I think the number one thing that I would absolutely say is incredibly important that he's done is he's made Europe and Britain realize that their military and foreign policy has been a gigantic disaster combine that with energy and industry and economic policy, and that they have not been funding their defense in anything like the level that we need. We've made ourselves reliant, well, not Britain so much, but Europeans made themselves incredibly reliant on Russian hydrocarbons, Russian energy, Russian gas, Russian oil. And that meant that when the war in Ukraine broke out, Europe was completely toothless in responding to that invasion, to the point where the Germans' first offer to the Ukrainians was 5,000 helmets. That's what they offered the Ukrainians in support. So what President Trump has done is he's come in and he said, look, we are happy to be allies with you, but you guys are going to have to carry your own weight. You're going to have to fund your own defense. He's been saying this, by the way, for a very long time, when the Germans openly laughed in his face when he told them all of these things. He has forced Europe to take seriously its own defense. I think that's an incredibly good thing, and I think it's an incredibly important thing, because we live in a world now in which you're going to see more conflict. We're going to have to get better at defending ourselves and also projecting our power abroad. So just on this, and that means necessarily we have to have certain changes in terms of our domestic policy when it comes to things like energy, when it comes to things like growing the economy, when it comes to mass immigration. All of these things he has forced Europe to reckon with on a realistic basis, instead of living in cloud cuckoo land where we've been living for a very long time. So to me, that is a huge achievement of his administration, for which I am very grateful.
Okay, so I don't understand how it feels like we're reframing a whole bunch of issues or problems that Trump has caused and then trying to claim that these are somehow beneficial to the continent of Europe. So the idea that Europe has to take its own defense seriously, why? Because the United States has decided to abdicate its military role across the planet? I don't understand how this is to be seen as a positive. I think that Europe, broadly speaking, has enjoyed a pretty good century of peace, prior or post World War II compared to the centuries beforehand. I think a lot of this is because of NATO, the expansion of NATO, because of U.S. protection of basically everybody around the world. Number one for Europe. From the U.S. side is very annoying to me, because we've spent so much money on our military with the understanding that there are benefits that we get from being friends with every single country around the planet, being able to ensure free shipping everywhere, being able to share intelligence and do military operations if we need to. And now it feels like our entire military investment was for naught. And now Europe is being told, well, you guys have to figure your own stuff out, even though Europe had largely entered this agreement with the United States, saying that, like, you're going to be our nuclear umbrella, you're going to cover a lot of the military projects, and then we're all going to kind of grow economically in the meantime. I don't know how Trump basically pulling the rug out from Europe on that and saying, well, you guys need to figure it out for yourself. Whatever Europe figures out for itself, it's going to be a worse arrangement than what existed before. It's not like Europe as a continent was struggling with their military defense as the United States stood by and watched all of it be destroyed. I think Europe enjoyed the ability to grow economically and to prosper more than it would have if every single country, or if a European Union, which has its own set of problems, were investing in their own military might. Number one, for the military thing. For the trade thing, I mean, the United States has undercut now its trading relationship with the European Union, and I think sadly even with the United Kingdom, regardless of what people think at the time. I think we can safely say that MAGA and the Brexit movement kind of like grew up together and shared a lot of similar rhetoric. It's kind of crazy to me that the United Kingdom, which was one of the only exporter economies, or that we exported more than we imported from, somehow still got punished with tariffs, that the United States didn't honor that trade surplus that we had with them them or honor any of the prior commitments or history. And now the United Kingdom has gotten screwed by the US tariff regime, along with the rest of Europe. And the idea of saying, well, Europe is going to have to figure out its own stuff because the United States has abandoned Europe is a good thing. I don't understand that. I feel like if my position was I wanted to create a weaker Europe, when we talk about Russia, I want to create a weaker Europe in any way possible, I don't know what I would say differently than what Donald Trump has essentially already done. Like if I'm Putin or if I'm Russia and I'm looking at the US and Europe, my ideal circumstance is, the United States just told Europe to deal with their own shit. That's awesome for me. I feel like the US being the umbrella for Europe is very much not awesome for me if I'm speaking from the Russian perspective.
Okay, so on the tariffs, I didn't say anything about tariffs because it's not a policy that, truthfully, I'm not entirely sure whether it's a policy that actually is going to work or not in the way that he claims. So I don't know. It's not instinctively something I'm a massive fan of, but it doesn't mean that it might not work. I don't know. But in terms of your other point about security, the Americans, I don't know if did you catch Marco Rubio's speech that he gave?
Yep.
Yeah. So he was explicitly saying the exact opposite of what you just said. He was not saying we are withdrawing our support from Europe. What he was saying is we want to be allies and friends with Europe, but we cannot do it on the basis that we protect you. It has to be on the basis that we work together to protect each other. That's what an alliance is. It's when people work together for a common purpose. A lot of countries in Europe have been doing what we in Britain call taking the piss for a long time, which is they've not even been funding their NATO obligations to the level that they were supposed to because they've been taking advantage of America. Now, the problem with taking advantage of America is I don't want Britain and Europe to be America's poodle. I want Britain, the country of which I am a citizen, to be independently powerful and influential. If you want to be independently powerful and influential, you have to have a strong economy and you have to have a strong military and you have a strong industrial base. So the fact that the Americans are challenging Europeans to do more is not the same as America withdrawing its support or its nuclear umbrella. We, by the way, in Britain and in France, have nuclear weapons, and we hope that they still work, given the way we've been funding them, but we think we have nuclear weapons that work, and so we don't need to be relying on the American nuclear umbrella. What we should be relying on is our own strength, and our own economies, and then, of course, partnership with other countries, including the United States. I'm not hearing anything out of the United States which is about abandoning its relationship with Europe. It's about encouraging Europe to also be strong and to be competent. I mean, we are at a point in Britain where we basically cannot make our own virgin steel, which means we can't make the things you make out of steel. We don't have a powerful industry to be able to make anything that's militarily useful at the scale that we need to. We would run out of ammunition. I don't remember the exact numbers. I'd have to look it up, but it's like within 2 weeks or something of a full war. And the decline in British manufacturing has been catastrophic. It's the same in all of the rest of Europe. Encouraging Europe and Britain to abandon that suicidal course, I think, is incredibly powerful and beneficial for this country and for Europe, and that's why I'm glad he's done that. In addition to that, I mean, we can look at you asked me what I support of the things that he's done. I think President Trump, if you look at his first term and now, he is someone who's taken a totally different approach to the Middle East. The Abraham Accords were a great step forward. I think with Jared Kushner negotiating in the Middle East, and also the hardline policy that he's taken on Iran, dealing with their plans for nuclear enrichment, these are all very positive developments because, of course, if Iran was allowed to develop nuclear weapons, the first thing that would happen is the Saudis would try and get them as well. It would destabilize the entire region. So for that reason, his foreign policy has been really, really strong, in my opinion, which is why I'm a big fan of it.
Sure. So there's one other thing I want to hit on before we finish. I guess as a quick thing, whatever Europe builds militarily absent the United States is going to be worse than the United States taking care of Europe militarily. And I think the United States gains a great deal of influence as a result of this. It was only under Donald Trump.
Of course, that's what I'm saying is I don't want us to be a lapdog to America. I want us to be independently strong.
That's fine, but I don't want to be mean about this, okay? But if we're realistic about the United Kingdom, or we're realistic about Europe, and we're realistic about where everybody's obsessive investments have been over the past century, right? The United States has invested heavily in a lot of military stuff. Whatever the UK and Europe will look like as a military thing it's going to be significantly worse than if the United States is essentially doing the heavy lifting.
That's precisely what I'd like to end.
But that won't end. That's impossible for that to end. That will never end. Because we blow things up and we fuck shit up. That's what we do in the United States. We've invested trillions of dollars year after year after year after year after year in this technology. And the idea that the UK, which is also struggling, or even all of Europe, which might be struggling in other areas, is going to magically catch up to the United States in that.
No, we're not going to catch up, but we are going to be strong enough relative to the size of our country. And
maybe, but at such an unnecessary cost. Like right now, what is the pressure? You talk about
who
running...
are you to decide what military Britain should have?
The defenders of Britain. What do you mean? Like, if nobody is going to invade a country...
Who elected you to decide whether Britain should have a military or not?
When
I want
European
this
countries...
to be able to defend itself, to have a strong economy, to have a strong industrial base, to have jobs for British people. That's what I'd like. And I don't take kindly to an American coming over here and telling us we're going to be shit at blowing things up. This country has a great history of blowing things up. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's fine. But the reality is whatever country you're trying to enact or design is going to be worse off in a world where the United States doesn't... You can say no, but that's the reality of the case, is it will be.
If we are more powerful, we will get more of what we want for our country. That's how power works.
I'm just curious, what is the projected timeline for that? Because none of that has worked out since you didn't become more powerful from Brexit. I don't see the more power coming in from
What does Brexit have to do with this?
This idea that isolating yourselves, and I don't necessarily mean just the UK, but that further isolation and entrenchment into your own autarky-like fantasies are...
No. I'm not in favor of isolation. Europe has not been doing what it needs to work collectively together to be stronger, right?
Because it hasn't needed to, right?
What I want is for Britain and other European countries and America to be stronger together, given the challenges we face from Putin's Russia, China, Iran, and other threats. That's what I want. The cloud cuckoo world of holding hands and singing Kumbaya is over. The geopolitical moment now is going to be more violent, more disruptive, and we need to be ready for that in this country, in Europe, and in America. And we should.
When you listen to European leaders talking,
but in order for that to happen, European countries, Britain, and America all have to be stronger. And what Trump is saying and what Marco Rubio was saying to Europeans is, let's be stronger together by you taking ownership and responsibility.
Sure.
That's what I want.
And I'll just say that spending the better part of the last year threatening to invade Greenland, I don't think has done much to foster positive resentment in Europe towards the United States, but I guess we'll see where that'll play out. Just one more thing. I see this rewritten a lot in the media, and I see you talk about it, and a lot of other people talk about it. Why is it that so many people are obsessed with pretending that when Donald Trump said that there were good people on both sides of that Charlottesville protest, why are people pretending that it was anything other than saying that the people in like the far-right neo-Nazi march had like good people in it? I don't understand where this like historical rewriting comes from.
Have you seen the clip?
Yes, I've seen all the speeches.
So you've seen that he says, I'm not talking about the KKK and neo-nationalists who should be condemned totally. I'm talking about some of the people who were there to protest about the statues.
Yeah, but that doesn't make sense because it was a KKK neo-Nazi march.
Well, what he's saying is that there were two groups there.
But there weren't.
Hold on. What he's saying... Just let me finish the argument and then we can talk about it. Is that there were people who were there to protest about the statues being removed, and there were also people there who were neo-Nazis. That is what he's saying. So
but it's not true.
What do you mean it's not true?
It was a unite the right, far right, neo-Nazi KKK.
And there were also some people there to protest about the statues. There was no people who were there to protest about the statues.
There might have been one or two, but like...
Hold on. There were no people there who were there to protest about the statues who are not neo-Nazis.
I don't think there were people in the Tiki Torch March that were just innocent wonder buyers.
Nor do I. But there were also people there protesting about the statues. I mean,
that's not how you would characterize. If there was a neo-Nazi march and there were a few people who just happened to be there that weren't necessarily neo-Nazis, you would still characterize it as a neo-Nazi march.
No, if that's what had happened, yes. But my understanding is there were people protesting about statues, and there was the Tiki Torch, this thing that you're talking about, the neo-Nazi march, which was a neo-Nazi march, which was abhorrent, right? And these two things happened at the same time in the same place, right?
They didn't. That's the point I'm trying to bring. Is there the only march there was the Unite the Right march, which all of their advertising memorabilia and all of the people who organized it were all well-known white supremacists, white identitarians, neo-Nazis. There was no other group of people.
So there weren't any normal people there just protesting about the statues?
I'm sure there might have been a couple normal people in the crowd, but it was a neo-Nazi organized march.
It was no more than two people?
Is this the... Hold on, wait, I just want to understand real quickly. You would agree with this statement. There was not a single BLM whole riot anywhere in the United States, because in any riot, there were not every single person rioting. So you would never characterize it as a riot.
No, I'd characterize it as a riot, but if someone said there were also some decent people who just care about social justice, I'd say of course there were.
If there was when we saw the videos of people setting car dealerships on fire and everything, and somebody was like, "What do you think about like the riots last night that set fire to the car dealerships?" And you're like, "Well, I think there were some good people there." Wouldn't that be like a really inappropriate thing to say? You say, "I condemn the violence. I think it's a horrible thing."
Of course, but that isn't what he said. He said, "I condemn the people who did the rioting, but we also have to recognize that there were also some people there who were not violent, and that's exactly the."
It wasn't about not being violent. It was about being a neo-Nazi.
Who were not neo-Nazis, right?
It was a neo-Nazi organized march.
But I'm not arguing with you about that point. What I'm saying is what he was saying was that there were some other people. You gave me the BLM example, right? If you said to me there was a BLM riot which burned down a police precinct, but also next to it there was some people standing with placards saying Black Lives Matter who are just decent people, I'd be like, that's fair enough, but the riot is what matters.
Yeah, but I wouldn't talk about the people with the placards because I'd probably be asked for a clear comment on how do I feel about the rioting.
Well, what he said is there were people there who I condemn, who were the neo-Nazis, and there was the other people. So your argument is, did he defend the KKK and neo-Nazis? I don't think he did that.
Every single person that was there that was a neo-Nazi felt like they had been defended by Donald Trump.
Their subjective feeling is not the issue here.
It's literally definition, the only thing that matters, because they're the ones organizing the marches. And if Richard Spencer and these other guys are saying, yeah, I think Donald Trump made a nothing burger statement.
The Unite the Right rally was reprehensible. And what happened there was atrocious. I don't defend it. I don't support it. I'm actively against it. I think it was horrific. And these people are terrible. I hate all of them. I criticize them all the time. You mentioned, by the way, earlier that I never criticize them. I'm literally the person who, not the person, I don't want to take all the credit, who came up with the concept of the woke right, for which I'm constantly attacked by all these retards like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and whatever, right? I believe in criticizing both the right and the left when they're going wrong. The point I was making is that Donald Trump did not defend the KKK and the neo-Nazis. He made a distinction between those people and the others. And he condemned the KKK and the neo-Nazis, which he did.
Sure, I understand your perspective on this, but the people there felt like they were being supported. This exact same thing played out with the Proud Boys before, where he said, stand back and stand by, and you can see the leaders of the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers on Parler and Gab saying, like, oh, we heard you loud and clear, President Trump, and then they showed up on January 6th. You can see the organizers of the march, Jason Kessler, I don't remember the guy's first name, him, you can see Richard Spencer, you can see Enoch, all tweeted out or were given press interviews where they said, yeah, we feel like, Trump was supporting us. It was a neo-Nazi organized march. It's just a very weird thing. And Donald Trump has a history of this inability to criticize people that he thinks supports them for being violent. This happened a lot in the wake of
These are all perfectly valid points on their own right, but they're separate from the only thing I've ever said about that, which is the people who claim that Donald Trump came out and said there are good people on both sides, and by good people he meant the KKK and the neo-Nazis. I don't think that's true. I don't think that matches the evidence of what he said.
Sure, although to be clear, nobody made that claim in particular. They said that he said that there were good people on both sides, where one side was an organized neo-Nazi alt-right march.
No, I think he made the distinction very, very clearly. And people do this all the time.
Everybody misunderstood him?
They take the words out of context to present that somebody said something they didn't say.
They're not under but apparently every person understood him to mean that he was supporting the neo-Nazis. The neo-Nazis felt that way, and the left-leaning people
are going to pretend that Trump supported them because it benefits them. That does not mean that if you read what he said or watch it in context, that is what he was saying.
If he would have just said unequivocally, I deny.
He said, I condemned the KKK and the neo-Nazis who are there totally, but there were also there people protesting about the statues.
Which there weren't.
That is what he said.
Sure, but there weren't those people.
That's what he said.
Okay.
And so when people try and present him as not having condemned them, that's just factually incorrect. And I care about the truth, and I care about the facts.
Okay.
Those are the facts.
I think the truth is really important, and I think using weird syntactical, out-of-context arguments to try to pretend that one thing was said when every single person understood a different thing, when you're asked to disavow a group of neo-Nazis that are marching, ostensibly supporting you as well, and your go-to immediately as well. I think there were, good people on both sides of that, and then you ham up all of these people that were supposedly just defending the tear down of a statue, and he went on to describe, there were a lot of people there who were just trying to save a statue. That's not true. That whole march was organized by alt-right people. If you listen to Trump's statement, you come away thinking, oh, I guess maybe there were multiple marches or multiple protests, or there was a decent protest in the morning, and then the neo-Nazis came later, but that's not true. There was a singular alt-right neo-Nazi march that was organized That's the only one he could have been referring to when he said there are good people on both sides. And what a pointless statement to make of saying, well, some people there might have been good people. That's true of the Nazi regime. That's true of literally everything in all of human history. Why even bother saying that unless you're just trying to obfuscate when you're being asked to take accountability for a group of people that you refuse to disavow?
You can have this argument with
We should finish with some final thoughts, guys. We are getting out of time here.
All right, well, final thoughts from me is that I'm glad we managed to actually have a conversation. It's been a lot more enjoyable than the first part of it, because I think when people talk, even if they don't agree, I think that's good. I think that it's helpful to understand that putting people in tribes and then ascribing the worst opinions that you wish they had so you can argue with them is not the way to actually conduct public debate. I think those of you who don't agree with me might have seen that I don't hold some of the opinions that you hope I hold in order that you could disagree with them, and that a lot of my opinions are actually quite reasonable and rational and based on the logic and facts of what I see. Doesn't mean you're going to suddenly start agreeing with them, but at least they make sense and there's a coherent worldview. So I'm very grateful for all of you coming out, and thank you very much for being here.
I feel like one of the kind of worst tricks that have been played on freedom of speech or debate or conversations over the past 10, 20 years is this concept that as long as two people are chattering at each other or in the direction of an audience, there's some kind of actual dialogue or actual conversation happening. I think that you can look at people who play this game of just asking questions, who don't stake out any real positions in anything. You can find them always leaning in a certain direction, always instigating a certain type of behavior, leading to things like the Southport riots, when somebody like Farage just comes out and lies and says that local British authorities are hiding evidence about Islamic extremism from a Muslim jihadist immigrant, and none of these things that are being true. People develop feelings about them, and then the same situation happens over and over and over and over again. And every single time when the people involved in spreading said misinformation are asked to take some accountability or asked how they feel about the things they've made, it's always the same broad allusion to freedom of speech and good conversations. I think that the arguments that have existed online today relating to the political cultures on both sides, especially the right, mainly the right, are just so unbelievably boring and played out. To hear the exact same talking points over and over again about how we need better immigrants, or we need to curb all of this, or wokeism and transgender people are destroying society. And then meanwhile, like the governments that are forming from these people, you guys are starting to have your own MAGA thing in the UK with Reform and Restore, is just a bunch of empty, hollow promises that just end up destroying the countries, ironically, even more than the perceived threats that they had before. I was promised in the United States that Hispanic people and Muslims were going to destroy my society, and I've got Donald Trump, who I don't even know how many more bombs have dropped in Iran or how many more attacks have gone on, the president of No New Wars, who's basically broken every single promise he's made. But the reason why he's been able to do this and get away with it is because the entire foundation that people drove towards voting for him was created on complete and total lies. And I don't know, I hope at some point in the future, over the next year or two, I know you guys still have some real journalists in this country. We've lost basically all of them in the United States. I hope that people force the epicentrists to kind of like take stronger positions on things, to not get upset and to put down their microphones when they're actually asked challenging questions about the positions they hold, rather than being allowed to endlessly demagogue about their positions over and over again without giving any specifics, and then to just repeat the same empty, hollow talking points they've had for the past decade that have basically achieved nothing. That's my feeling on it.
Please put your hands together for Konstantin Kisin and Destiny.